Hey everybody, how you doing? Glad to be here with you tonight. We got a lot of great stuff to talk about. All right, let's go.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just it's a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
All right, everybody. Welcome. Looks like some of the folks on Rumble didn't get the memo that I was delaying by an hour. I apologize. Hope you're still with us. But yeah, we're here. You know, we don't always start exactly at the time that we want. Stuff happens. Life happens, right? We're getting over a snow apocalypse here in New York City. Pretty wild. But listen, we've got a great show tonight. So the way it's going to work, standard procedure, first the opening remarks, then the roll call, and then I answer your questions for the remainder of the show. Now, if there's something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the show, you can send a Rumble rant if you're watching on the Rumble. You can cash at me at CalebMoppin22. But the best way, the absolute best way is to buy me a coffee. And somebody already did. We received one buy me a coffee that took place. It was from Talking Smack. And I will answer their question. It was the first one. It came in, and you can send buy me a coffees anytime. I don't have to be live for you to send them, right? Buy me a coffees can come in anytime. So if you're watching this tomorrow or the next day and you want to send me a buy me a coffee, go ahead. It works. And yeah, buy me a coffee is the best way to send your questions. No word limit. You can go as long as you want. It's just absolutely awesome. So that's how it works. Second half of the show is all you guys. Now, I do have a very special announcement to make. It's early, but hey, we got to start early because we got a lot to do beforehand. The National Convention of the Center for Political Innovation will be taking place August 15th in the Chicago area. This is the name. The dream will be fulfilled. Peace, innovation, and multipolarity. I am very, very, very excited. We just put the announcement on the website. So mark your calendar for August 15th. Head to the Chicago area. It's going to be great. Speeches, music, prominent guests, possibly. It's going to be a great, great gathering. So yeah, we've got the announcement up on our website. Very, very exciting. And just like last year, we'll be having our From a Drop to an Ocean 7-day workshop. It will be in August, not July. Got to change the poster there. But yeah, it'll be during the convention activities. We will be having our From a Drop to an Ocean workshop. And that's for members of CPI to complete their accreditation. And you can actually register for the 7-day program. You can register on the website. It's from August 12th to August 19th. And that will be in the Chicago area. So very, very, very exciting. Very, very exciting indeed. It's going to be great. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you in Chicago for our national convention. Last year we had a blast, and we're going to have a blast once again this year. Music, speeches, awards, all the whole 9 yards. It's going to be a great day, August 15th. It's going to be awesome. It's the 1-year anniversary of when Trump and Putin met in Alaska. We'll obviously be talking about the dream of a Bering Sea bridge connecting to Russia. It's going to be just an absolutely awesome event. So if you can join us for the 7-day program, be there, become an accredited member of CPI. We'd like that. We had 22 people at the workshop last summer complete their accreditation. We hope to get 30. Our goal is for 30 people to join us for the full 7 days this summer. And the convention hall, we're going to fill up that hall. It's going to be great. We are a great organization. We are marching ahead. So very, very exciting. Dare to struggle, dare to win, as always. Now, I guess from here, Just a reminder that the second half of the show is all you guys. It's all your questions. And the best way to send questions is buy me a coffee. So send me a question, send me a question for the second half of the show. Yeah, send me a question. Go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. Send questions for the second half of the show. I also take Rumble rants, and I also take Cash Apps, Caleb Maupin 22. Glad to be here with all of you. So, I had a couple things on my mind tonight. First of all, the danger of war against Iran is hanging over our heads. John Kiriakou says he believes there's going to be a strike. His inside information as a former CIA officer is that a strike is happening, and that J.D. Vance and Tulsi Gabbard are opposed. Very interesting. But that's not confirmed. No strike has yet taken place. Meanwhile, at the same time, there is widespread opposition in the United States, according to every poll. Now, we at the Center for Political Innovation signed a statement from the Islamic Human Rights Council, right? The Islamic Human Rights Commission, rather. They are an organization that is from Iran that facilitates work with the United Nations. And they asked us to sign their statement opposing threats of war against Iran. And so we did sign it, and it's on their website. It was delivered to the UN Secretary General, and you can find it on our website as well. And there's a lot of very prominent people, who signed the statement along with us. It's quite an honor to be included in this appeal from Iran. Cindy Sheehan signed it. The Islamic Cultural Center of Boston signed it. Daniel Stulin of Lithuania, the conspiracy writer, signed it. David Rovics, the folk musician, signed it, right? I'm just looking at the names. A lot of people from around the world that maybe you're not familiar with, but a lot of people. Stephen Sizer, the very anti-Israel vicar of the Episcopal Church, the Church of England. He signed it. Kevin Barrett, the Arabologist and 9/11 truther. You just look at all the names that signed this statement, right? It was a lot, right? The Indiana Center for Middle East Peace, the National Alliance for Climate Change and Ecological Research of India, right? Paul LaRudy, who was a former U.S. diplomat to Saudi Arabia, right? Our name is on there as Center for Political Innovation, along with all kinds of very important people, right? Gordon Duff, the guy who started Veterans Today, and members of parliament from Nigeria. And it's hundreds of people signed this declaration to the UN Secretary General opposing war with Iran. I'm just looking over the list. So many people from the African continent, from India, from the Middle East, from so many parts of the world are represented. It's really, really spectacular. So yeah, I look at it and it's just really an honor to have our name on the list. And Cynthia McKinney, the former congresswoman, a hero of mine, who, we met. Tommy Sheridan, a member of the Scottish Parliament, the leader of the Scottish Socialist Party, someone I've looked up to for his oratory ability. His name is on the list, right? Sarah Flounders, Workers' World Party, right? So many people, you look at this, who signed this statement that we also signed, and we are proud to have signed. And it shows how well connected we are to an international movement. We don't stand alone. E. Michael Jones, the Roman Catholic theologian from Indiana, he signed the statement, right? Where else would you see E. Michael Jones and Cynthia McKinney and Sarah Flounders and the Institute for Climate Change of India on the same list? Only an anti-war statement like this. Kevin Barrett and just so many prominent people, and we're very, very proud to have put our name on the list. Yeah, it's really, really great. So Wanted to get that out there. And I also wanted to share this once again. So, folks, just to be clear, right? I do want to be honest with people, right? In case there's any confusion, because there seems to be some confusion about this. I showed this on last night's stream. And during last night's stream, I tweeted it out because I thought it was important. This exchange happened in 2019, right? John Kirby no longer works at the U.S. State Department. He is an Obama administration official. This happened in 2019, a little while ago, right? This did not happen, recently. It did happen back in 2019 when John Kirby was at the U.S. State Department as a State Department spokesperson. He no longer works there. So it's not fresh, but it's still really important because the basis of which the Trump administration is threatening to attack Iran is the idea that they, with their peaceful nuclear energy program, are trying to get a nuclear weapon. That is the claim. And Iran has said, we are not trying to get a nuclear weapon. And it really doesn't matter because Iran has signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And in compliance with that treaty, every nuclear site that Iran has is monitored 24 hours a day by the International Atomic Energy Agency. So if Iran were to violate the way they run their nuclear facilities and move toward getting a nuclear weapon, they would immediately be called out by the International Atomic Energy Agency for that. And that's not happened, right? So at this point, there doesn't seem to be any basis for complaining that Iran might get a nuclear weapon. Iran gave up almost all of its peaceful nuclear energy program in 2015 as part of the Iran nuclear deal negotiations. After that, the USA pulled out of the deal after Iran made those huge concessions, giving up almost all of their peaceful nuclear energy program in exchange for the USA lifting some sanctions and declaring in writing that they have the right to peaceful nuclear energy. After that, the USA pulled out, and then Iran's top general, Qasem Soleimani, was murdered, and he was murdered in an absolutely cowardly way. They invited him to Iraq for peace negotiations. As he was leaving Iraq and headed to the airport, they hit his car with a drone. It was one of the most cowardly, like shooting someone in the back while they're retreating. They lured him to Iraq for peace talks, so they knew where he would be, and then they shot and killed his car with a drone. It's just a cowardly act of murder. And so at that point, Iran pulled out of the deal as well because the United States wasn't holding up their end of the bargain. And so now we have the United States once again trying to tell Iran how much peaceful nuclear energy and uranium enrichment that they can have. And the whole thing is ridiculous when you take into account that there is one country in the Middle East that has hundreds of nuclear weapons, and that country is Israel. And the USA gets out of acknowledging this by saying, we don't know that Israel has nuclear weapons, just not acknowledging the Israeli nuclear program. And when I was based in Washington, D.C. in 2019, I was able to confront the U.S. State Department over this discrepancy. And so this is the interaction that I had. Not a recent occurrence, but very relevant to current events. I'm going to show it one more time. It's been retweeted on my account about 7,600 times. But I've seen that a number of other accounts have picked up this video. It's gone viral in the last few days. And it should, because the idea that we're threatening to have a war with Iran because they potentially might get nukes, when there's one country in the region that's Iran's enemy that has hundreds of nukes, is absolutely crazy. So this is me confronting John Kirby about the Israeli nuclear program.
So an email has recently come to light, an exchange between Jeffrey Leeds and former Secretary of State Colin Powell, in which he acknowledges that Israel has, quote, he says 200 nuclear weapons. And the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty has not been signed by Israel. Under U.S. law, the United States should cut off support to Israel because it's a nuclear power that has not signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, according to Colin Powell, correct?
Shouldn't you ask Colin Powell that? I'm not going to speak to this particular traffic, and I'm certainly not going to discuss. So you're saying Israel doesn't have nuclear weapons? I'm certainly not going to discuss matters of intelligence from the podium. I'm not. I have no comment on that.
Okay. Well, the email says the boys in Tehran know Israel has 200, all we targeted on Tehran, and we have thousands. I mean, that seems to indicate that there's a knowledge of an Israeli nuclear program, which would make U.S. aid to Israel illegal.
I think I've answered your question.
Okay. Well, let me ask. Is that, do I have the correct understanding of U.S. law that we're not allowed to support a nuclear power that has not signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty?
Look, we obviously support the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. I'm not a legal expert on all the tenets of it, and I'm certainly not going to speak about the details that you've revealed here in this email traffic. That would be inappropriate for me to discuss one way or the other. I'm not going to do it.
There are sanctions imposed on North Korea in response to their nuclear proliferation. There were sanctions put on Iran in response to allegations of nuclear proliferation. And now we have this email from Colin Powell saying that Israel has 200 nuclear weapons. Why is Israel not facing any consequence for this?
That's a very colorful way of getting back to the same question you just asked me. But I'm going to refer you back to the transcript when you see it this afternoon to what I said before to your question. Saeed?
You're familiar with this email, right?
I'm not.
Oh.
I have not seen it. I can't speak to the email, and frankly, even if I'd seen it, sir, I wouldn't engage in that kind of a discussion from the podium.
Yeah. That was an exchange that happened, and it's hitting home. Now, I also did a story last week on RT. That's my job. I'm an RT reporter, and I did a story about Iran and the threat of war against Iran. And I guess, I think I will show that here, right? I want to make sure I show the right video, but I will show my RT report that I did on this topic as well. Why not, right? Yeah, hold on. I will just show the report that I did. I just got to hold on here. Scrolling. Just want to make sure I show the right video. Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah. Here is my report on this topic that I did for RT. And then I want to reflect on a couple other things. But yeah, we'll just show this. We might as well, because this is the topic. Are we going to have a new war with Iran or not? Well, here's my report that I did for RT last week.
Direct talks between the US and Iran in Geneva were unable to bring a breakthrough. Despite the White House insisting its commitment to diplomacy, Washington has sent even more forces to the Middle East. Some analysts suggest the Trump team is using negotiations to stall for time in order to prepare for an escalation. RT correspondent Caleb Morpin has more.
2 rounds of talks between the U.S. government and the Islamic Republic, but the White House says there is still disagreement.
I think you heard from the administration and the State Department yesterday that there was a little bit of progress made, but we're still very far apart on some issues. I believe the Iranians are expected to come back to us with some more detail in the next couple of weeks, and so the president will continue to watch how this plays out.
Diplomacy is number one, but it's Trump-style diplomacy.
President Trump has some very basic guiding principles. First is America and Americans first. America and her security, her citizens, and her workers first, which is long overdue. The second principle, front and center, peace through strength. At the War Department, we are the Strength Department. Our job is to be the hammer when necessary and hopefully not have to use it. But if we do, we'll fight to win.
In the name of peace through strength, the United States has deployed all kinds of aircraft, warships, and military personnel to the region. You've got 6 E-3 Sentry AWACS aircraft. These are U.S. control and command planes. In addition to that, you've got RC-135B intelligence gathering planes as well. The USS Gerald Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier, is on its way to the region. This is the biggest deployment since the USA invaded Iraq in 2003. Now, there's some key similarities with that war as well. The invasion of Iraq started with shock and awe, a brutal display of force done in the name of giving freedom to the Iraqi people. And now Trump is talking the same way Bush once talked. Both countries, Iraq and Iran, have plenty of oil. Iran currently produces 3.2 million barrels of oil per day. But they've got the potential for a lot more than that. They currently sit on 209 billion barrels of natural oil reserves, just behind Venezuela and Saudi Arabia. Trump recently claimed control of Venezuela's oil, and it seems that now the United States has got its sights on Iran as well. But a strike hasn't happened yet. Why? Well, first of all, it's a buzzkill for Trump at the polls. At this point, Americans don't want another war, and things aren't looking too good for Republicans in the midterm congressional elections. If Republicans lose control of Congress, it looks like Trump may face another impeachment attempt.
You got to win the midterms, because if we don't win the midterms, it's just going to be, they'll find a reason to impeach me.
After kidnapping Maduro, Trump is apparently under political threat and having to weigh his different options.
During Donald Trump's first term, I called for his impeachment under then-Speaker Nancy Pelosi. He was impeached twice, yet escaped accountability due to a lack of Republican support. Today, many Democrats have understandably questioned whether impeachment is possible again under the current political reality.
But who has the most to gain if Trump goes ahead and attacks Iran? Israel. Israel has seen the Islamic Republic as their primary enemy in the region for decades. It looks like they want America to do their dirty work for them.
I will not hide from you that I express my skepticism of any deal with Iran because, frankly, Iran is reliable on one thing. They lie.
Netanyahu sang a similar tune before the U.S. attack on Iraq, remember?
If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region. The first victory in Afghanistan makes the second victory in Iraq that much easier.
When the U.S. launched a regime change war against Iraq in 2003, hundreds of thousands of people died. The region has been plagued by terrorism and refugee crises ever since. But Israel saw a government that supported the Palestinians and had long-range missiles eliminated. It was a huge win for them. Trump might sink himself politically and cause all sorts of death and chaos if he ends up attacking Iran. But for Israel, it'll be a clean win, with somebody else footing the bill. America first, huh? Makes you wonder who's setting the agenda for foreign policy at the White House. Caleb Maupin, RT, New York.
Yeah, that was my report. But look, we're dealing with the danger and the threat of a new war against Iran. It would benefit Israel. And it would not benefit America. Americans don't want it at the polls. And yeah, it would be Epstein's war. And that's why we're going to be hitting the streets around the country on Saturday. This coming Saturday, we've called for a national day of action to oppose the threat of war against Iran. We put out our call, and there's going to be rallies in a number of different cities where we make clear, to the world that there are people here in America, and we really represent the majority of the American people who would oppose such a new war. That is our message, and that's what we're here to say. So keep an eye out for the videos that'll be out of our protests around the country that are coming up. Now, I wanted to talk about another thing. I just wanted to reflect on this a little bit briefly. Because we're working on like a small booklet or pamphlet. And it's going to be out soon. And I'm working with another CPI member on it who's been interviewing me about my experiences. We're working on this small pamphlet kind of about how the Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, has targeted me over the years, has targeted CPI. We're kind of getting all the facts together and different things. And in it, we've been highlighting different moments in my activist history. And it's really going to be kind of a fun walk down memory lane doing this. And it's partially to show where the hate for CPI comes from and all of that. But one of the events that we kind of revisited in the process of working on this small booklet was in 2010, the United National Anti-War Committee was formed. And I attended in Albany, New York, the gathering where the United National Anti-War Coalition or Committee or whatever it calls itself now, UNAC, was formed. And I was there in Albany, right? Obama had been in office for 2 years, and there was talk of forming a new anti-war coalition. And I was there. I had long hair and a beard. I worked at a gas station at the time. It was July of 2010. And I still lived in Cleveland. I hadn't moved to New York, but I attended this conference in Albany, New York. And looking back on it now that we know about Noam Chomsky now and his ties to Epstein, And now that we know a lot of different things, it was obvious this conference in Albany was just full of spies. It was full of Israeli spies. It sounds a little bit crazy to believe, but it really is. And I look back on the drama that happened at that conference, and even though the left is anti-Israel, it was Obama had just been elected. The anti-war movement still had a lot of energy because there had been a lot of anger at Bush for his invasion of Iraq. And this conference was full of Mossad spies. I mean, one of them gave a speech to the conference, Noam Chomsky, right? He was consulting with Mossad and Epstein, right? We know that now, that he was an Epstein associate, right? So, and he was urging people not to boycott Israel, right? And he spoke. He gave a half-hour speech via video link addressing the conference. But it was more than that. For example, there was a guy named Jerry Gordon, and Jerry Gordon was an organizer of the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. And he brought a whole bunch of officials from the United Food and Commercial Workers Unions. This guy was an old Trotskyite, and he brought, workers from the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, not workers, but like union staffers, like paid union bosses. And the idea was that the United Food and Commercial Workers Union would pay and sponsor the anti-war movement. And Jerry Gordon was there, and they were there, but Jerry Gordon proposed, he said, we have to never mention Palestine. We've got to block all mention of Palestine because it's divisive. And working people, his argument was, working people support Israel, and they'll be confused by it. So we got to block all mention of Palestine. And I was at the convention, and I sat in the front row. I was a disciplined member of the Workers' World Party. We were there voting as a bloc, right? We were a disciplined organization. We had our marching orders, and, there were all kinds of different anti-war groups. There's about 850 people at this convention at the Crown Plaza Hotel in Albany, New York. And, I did this thing. I was this young kid. I was sitting towards the front next to Sarah Flounders. I had long hair and a beard, and I shouted, "Motion to extend debate," because they were using Robert's Rules of Order, putting forward motions and resolutions. And so whenever they would put forward a resolution that was a resolution that we didn't agree with, I would shout, "Motion to extend debate," right? And so that became kind of a running joke, and people would see me in the elevator and be like, "You're the motion to extend debate guy." It was kind of cute. It was kind of funny. I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of the boomers that were there were quite excited to see a young person. I was 22 years old at the time. I was very interested in anti-war activism. So anyway, when they put forward their resolution, "We can never mention Palestine," Jerry Gordon said, Trotskyite Jerry Gordon said, "We can never mention Palestine because working class people, they just support Israel." I got up and I said, "My name is Caleb Maupin. I'm 22 years old. I work at a gas station in Cleveland, and my coworkers don't support Israel. And I used to work at a call center in Cleveland, and my coworkers there don't support Israel. And, I don't think there's widespread support for Israel among working people. I think the people who support Israel are the Democrats. It's the Democrats who support Israel. It's the Democrats who are Zionists, and the labor union bosses that support Israel. But rank and file workers, I don't think they're not going to join some movement just because it has Palestine in it. I just don't think that's correct." And that's what I said from the floor of the convention. Got thunderous applause. People really, really appreciated it. Fred Goldstein came up to me and said, good work, Caleb, sticking up for shop floor workers and all of that. However, as I was speaking, there was a group of people centered toward the front of the hall, grouped around Judith LeBlanc. And Judith LeBlanc is a leader of the Communist Party. She's a Native American. She was the head of Land Back, right? At one point, she was the head of the United for Peace and Justice coalition. And they all just gave me a death stare, like, how dare you? How dare you? So then afterwards, I'm walking out of the hall, and this older woman walks up to me, clearly, she was offended by my words because she was of Jewish descent. And she said, "You called me a Zionist." I'm thinking, I didn't call you and she said, "You called me a Zionist. Why didn't you just call me a baby eater?" I remember thinking, baby eater? Why would I call you a baby eater? And I didn't know what she was referring to. I didn't know what that meant. A baby eater? You called me a Zionist. I didn't call her a Zionist. Why didn't you just call me a baby eater? Why would I call her a baby eater? I did not call this woman a Zionist. I'd never met this woman before in my life. And I certainly didn't call her a baby eater. But I learned later what she was talking about. That was a reference to the blood libel, right? During the Middle Ages, one of the reasons that Jews were persecuted was because there was this rumor that that Jews kidnapped Gentile children's babies and drank their blood and sacrificed them. So what she was saying was, I was an anti-Semitic pogrom guy, that I was anti-Semitic, right? That I was a Nazi, basically, is what she was saying, because of this blood libel thing. So, and then she said, someday, kid, you're going to learn that it's people like you that are the reason that wars keep happening. I thought, people like me? What is she talking about? Well, non-Jews, Goyim, right? Right? That's what she meant, right? And she saw me as an anti-Semitic. And it's funny, I was an atheist at this time. I was quite an obnoxious militant atheist at the time, but she saw me as a Christian guy from Ohio, a rank and file worker. I'd identified myself as somebody who worked at a gas station. I guess I had an accent back then, and and she said, people like you, right? So it's us Goyim that cause wars to be happening, right? If only, the enlightened Zionists could rule the world, there wouldn't be any more wars, right? If greater Israel could be established, right? And by calling her a Zionist, which I never did, I'd never met this woman before. Apparently I'd been calling her a baby eater, revealing that I was a Gentile, forming a mob of Goyim to storm the ghetto and kill all the Jews or whatever, and it was just bizarre, right? It was absolutely bizarre. Well, now I know what that was, right? Why in the world was this woman, who was like, she basically had the politics of Likud, right? When she thought somebody who said, geez, my coworkers are not Zionists, my coworkers don't support Israel, she took that as kill all the Jews. That's hardcore Zionism. That's Likud politics. But she was there pretending to be an anti-war activist. And she was there supporting the Communist Party USA and supporting Jerry Gordon and trying to make sure that this convention made sure that Israel and criticism of Israel was not included in this new anti-war coalition. She was a Mossad asset, maybe not an agent, but an asset. And the conference had a number of people like that I don't think were real anti-war activists. They were Zionists. They were agents sent there. Another moment from the convention that stood out was they put forward a resolution saying that we need to overthrow the Iranian government, but attacking Iran is not the best way to do it, right? That we need a peaceful protest movement to bring down the Iranian government, and the Iranian government is oppressive and must be overthrown. Well, of course, we didn't support that. Motion to extend debate. We opposed it. We shot down that resolution. And we shot it down because it was basically a way they wanted the anti-war coalition to announce support for the green movement to overthrow the Islamic Republic. And it was voted down. When it was voted down, we clapped, we applauded. And this woman named Deborah Sweet, who was the leader of The World Can't Wait and the Revolutionary Communist Party, stood up and shouted, "You all are cheering for fascism in Iran. You should be ashamed of yourselves," and stormed out, kicked a chair, made a big scene. Well, why did she do that? I guess she just strongly disagreed. No. The Revolutionary Communist Party, led by Bob Avakian, every year on International Women's Day, in Berlin, Germany, right? This is an American communist group, but their leaders fly to Berlin, Germany for March 8th, International Women's Day, to have a rally with the Mujahideen Khalq, the MEK, the terrorists that are trying to overthrow the Iranian government and assassinated Iran's peaceful nuclear energy scientists in coordination with the Mossad, right? So she's there. Her group works with the Mujahideen Khalq, the MEK terrorists who murdered peaceful Iranian scientists, right? And so, she was furious that we didn't pass a resolution agreeing with their attempt to overthrow the Iranian government. Very, very interesting. And again, she was not a Mossad agent. Deborah Sweet is not a Mossad agent, but she's in an organization that collaborates with MEK, Mujahideen Khalq, which is a Mossad collaborating organization, the Mujahideen Khalq, the MEK. It's an anti-Iran counter gang at this point that functions as very close allies of Israel. That has killed thousands of Iranians, not just police and military people, but also civilians, right? And I mean, MEK is a pretty nasty terrorist group. They used to work for Saddam Hussein, but after the USA invaded Iraq in 2003, they started working for the neoconservatives and for Israel. And they run a network of spies inside of Iran. They're a pretty nasty terrorist group, and the RCP, the Revolutionary Communist Party, had ties with them. So that was another moment where Mossad, had its fingers in the conference. But then, the classic moment was Noam Chomsky gave a speech for a half hour. He gave a half-hour lecture to the conference, via video, a pre-recorded video they put on the screen. Noam Chomsky talked for a half hour. Well, we know about Noam Chomsky and Epstein, and, there you go. Right. So I look back on that conference and, it's funny. I have been fighting Zionism longer than I knew I was fighting Zionism. I just thought I was being a good loyal member of the Workers' World Party. But there I was, you called me a baby eater and, and I was opposing, resolution. And, it's interesting to see how well Israeli intelligence has infiltrated leftist spaces. Right. And then ultimately, I mean, what this pamphlet I'm working on with this other person is ultimately about is Alex Reed Ross. Alex Reed Ross, ran a hit piece against me in Haaretz. And Haaretz is the voice of the Israeli government. It's like the liberal newspaper of record of Israel. Right. And in 2019, they ran a hit piece against me in Haaretz, which you can read. I mean, it's on the Haaretz website still. This DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, anarchist professor wrote this smear piece against me in Haaretz, basically calling me a Nazi because I went to a conference in Iran. Right? It's called the Anti-Semitism Fest, where Russian spies, Code Pink, David Duke, and the Nation of Islam make friends and influence people. Right. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. And it's all about how basically, this conference, everyone who attended this anti-Israel conference in Iran is actually, a Nazi. It's a ridiculous article. What's interesting though, in Haaretz, you can pretty much assume it's approved by Mossad, right? Just like if something's published in the New York Times, you can be pretty sure that the CIA approves, or if something's published in the BBC, you can be pretty sure that MI5 approves. Well, if this is published in Haaretz, Mossad approved. If it was published in the Jerusalem Post, that's a right-wing, thing that's a little more dissident. You could say maybe not, but if it's in Haaretz, they approve, right? Haaretz is like the NPR or the New York Times of Israel. And what's interesting is not that Haaretz wrote this, but that a DSA guy wrote it for them. A member of Democratic Socialists of America wrote it, right? And what's also interesting is that immediately after this, a hate campaign against me started online, calling me a white supremacist, calling me a neo-Nazi, and all these bread tube people were following the same script, from the Mossad, right? There's a whole hate campaign against me, claiming that I'm secretly a Nazi and that I'm a pedophile and that I'm a rapist and that I'm all these awful things. And, the amount of hate that I have personally been subjected to is massive. The amount of demonization they have piled on me is like ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. They have spent millions of dollars against me personally. And that sounds maybe exaggerated, but, just look at what they have done, right? I mean, they've literally paid people I used to work with to gossip about my private life. They've the lengths they have gone to demonize me are massive. And they haven't been able to destroy me, right? And I continue to do my great work. And CPI continues to exist despite everything they've thrown at us. They're really threatened by us. We're the real deal. But I think about that, and that's what this upcoming pamphlet is about. But I just thought today about the UNAC conference, and now that we know about Noam Chomsky, but then there was also the woman yelling at me about me calling her a baby eater, and then there's also Deborah Sweet pitching a fit because we didn't want to overthrow the government of Iran. Israel has its fingers in a lot of places. Mossad is very smart, right? They send people into anti-Israel spaces to pretend they oppose Israel too, but police the message, right? What a coincidence that the biggest anti-Israel group, which has a lot of great people in it. I'm not saying this is a bad group. There's a lot of great people in the group who do great work with them. Is called Jewish Voices for Peace, right? Now, Jewish Voices for Peace is full of a lot of really, really good folks that are Jewish and oppose Israel. But you'll notice that Jewish Voices for Peace is also full of agents, right? And people who've had experience with Jewish Voices for Peace can confirm that the amount of cancel culture that goes on in that organization, the amount of smear campaigns and witch hunting of people who appear on RT and all of that is interesting. And Jewish Voices for Peace, their protests are inside the halls of Congress, inside of Trump Tower, right? I went and covered an event where they took over Trump Tower. They had like a planned arrest at Trump Tower. Associated Press was live streaming it before it even started, right? This is intelligence, right? Israel is very good at being on both sides of every issue. And I just want to briefly touch on the Soviet Union and Israel, because I hear naivete whenever the Soviet Union and Israel is discussed. Look, the Soviet Union is responsible for the creation of Israel. They could have stopped it, and they did not. And that's a reprehensible stain on the Soviet Union's record. And they almost immediately recognized their mistake, right? 1948, the Second World War had just happened. And the Soviet Union had won a lot of respect all over the world for being the people who defeated Hitler, right? Today is Defender of the Fatherland Day, right? And today is a day that all over the world, but especially in Russia, people are celebrating the achievements of the Soviet army in defeating the Nazis. And the Soviet Union, there were a lot of people in Eastern Europe, a lot of people in China, a lot of people on the Korean Peninsula. Maybe they hadn't been sympathetic to the communists, but those Nazis or those Japanese invaders showed up and were doing awful things. And the communists were the ones fighting against that shit. And so they liked the communists, right? The communists had a huge amount of credibility coming out of the Second World War. In France, the Communist Party surged in membership. In Italy, the communists had formed the partisan brigades that had fought Mussolini, and they surged in membership, became one of the biggest political parties in Italy. Communism, was expanding on the African continent, in South America, everywhere. People saw communists as heroic anti-fascists. In Japan, the communists, in China, the communists became the government, right? They took control of the mainland because they've been such heroic fighters against the Japanese, right? And in North Korea, you had the Democratic People's Republic of Korea created, and it was the part of the Korean Peninsula liberated by Soviet troops. Kim Il-sung declared the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. And so communism was viewed as heroic because of anti-fascism. And Israel presented itself to the world as a socialistic country, right? The Labor Party of Israel, Haganah, called itself socialist, social democratic. And they basically argued that, Israel is going to be a place that Jews can go to make sure a Holocaust never happens again. And it's going to be socialistic. And a lot was going on. And the Soviet Union was just not in a position where they just couldn't oppose Israel. Because if they did, it would have been a shot at their big point of credibility. We are anti-fascists. And so the Soviet Union made the mistake of supporting Israel in 1948. And the biggest supporters of that were the Communist Party USA. And you can actually, it's unfortunate. You read, there are books the Communist Party USA published in 1948 condemning the American government for not supporting Israel enough, right? Henry Wallace, who was a great anti-war guy in a lot of ways, protested against Harry Truman, not for supporting Israel, but saying he was not moving quickly enough to create Israel, not doing enough to support Israel. Eleanor Roosevelt was a big supporter of Israel. And the global communist movement got Israel wrong. Now, the Trotskyists, that was one issue they got right. They did oppose all nationalism. And so they held on to what had been the communist position all the way up until through World War II, which had been Stalin's position, had been Lenin's position, that Zionism is a reactionary trend of the Jewish bourgeoisie. That's what Lenin said in his book on the national question. That's what Stalin said in his book on the national question. Earl Browder even wrote a book condemning Zionism. The Communist Party had an official pamphlet, opposing Zionism. That there had always been opposition to Zionism. But after World War II, the Soviet Union supported Israel and almost immediately regretted it. Because in the early 1950s, even in 1950, they started finding Israeli spies all over the Eastern Bloc. In Czechoslovakia, they discovered a network of Israeli spies and they hung them. They had public executions, and Israel took photos of the hanging of Israeli spies and said, "Oh my God, the Czechoslovakian communists are just like the Nazis. They're killing Jews." No, they're killing spies. There was synagogues all over Czechoslovakia. I know people who attended synagogue services. I know older Jewish folks who attended synagogues in Soviet, communist Czechoslovakia. And it was actually illegal to publish any anti-Semitic remarks in the Soviet press. You could go to jail for promoting racial bigotry or anti-Semitism. But regardless, starting in the early 1950s, Israel flooded the world with fake news that the Soviet Union was promoting anti-Semitism. And there was a plot to kill Stalin, the doctors' plot. And there were a number of doctors who were conspiring to kill Stalin, most of whom were not Jewish, right? A number of them were, but not all of them, right? In fact, the majority were not Jewish, the infamous doctors' plot. And I mean, these doctors that were anti-Soviet were caught doing some pretty awful things, like giving people, medicine that was actually poison and doing some awful stuff. And they were trying to conspire to kill Stalin. And Stalin, when he condemned the doctors' plot, Stalin he used the phrase, he said that the doctors were opposing the Soviet Union because they were rootless cosmopolitans. That was the phrase he used, rootless cosmopolitans. And so Israel picked up that phrase, rootless cosmopolitans, said, Stalin is killing these doctors because they're all Jews. Well, most of them were not Jews, right? But that was the phrase that Stalin had used. He said rootless cosmopolitans. They declared rootless cosmopolitan was code for Jew. And Israel started rallying the Jewish community of the world against the Soviet Union. Now, Israel and the Soviet Union technically were on good terms with each other until 1967. Wasn't until 1967 when the 1967 war happened that Israel and the Soviet Union officially cut ties because the Soviet Union diplomatically recognized the Palestine Liberation Organization. At that point, Israel cut their ties with them. But I mean, the real factor, the major factor, and why it was almost immediately after Israel was created, the Soviets started opposing them. One of the biggest factors was Abdel Nasser, the president of Egypt, right? Egypt had a president. I believe he came to power. When did he come to power? Gamal Abdel Nasser, right? Was just a great leader of Egypt, right? And when did Abdel Nasser take power, right? He took power in 1954. 1954, Gamal Abdel Nasser took power in Egypt. And Gamal Abdel Nasser is considered, Egyptians love him and consider him to just be one of the greatest leaders in the history of their country because he electrified the country, right? He built the Great Aswan Dam. And Abdel Nasser was not a communist because he was a Muslim. He believed in God and he practiced Islam. But he said that he was developing what he called Arab socialism, right? And Gamal Abdel Nasser got funding from the Soviet Union, and he used the Egyptian military to build up the economy. They built the Great Aswan Dam, which is the largest hydroelectrical power plant in the Middle East, the Great Aswan Dam. And he built that, and they electrified Egypt. It was very, very amazing what he did. And Gamal Abdel Nasser was opposed to Israel very strongly, right? He considered Israel, because of what Israel did to the Palestinians and because of Israel's threats against its neighbors, he opposed Israel, right? And because of that, and because the Soviet Union was aligned with him, because the Soviet Union aligned with him. And also they started having patriotic officer societies across the Middle East. People in the military who admired Nasser and were studying Arab socialism formed patriotic officer clubs or patriotic officer societies. Because of that, Israel was very opposed to the Soviet Union because they were aligning themselves with Arab nationalism. And that's important as well. But yeah, ultimately, 1967, Egypt led the Arab countries to go to war with Israel, and it was about territory. And that brings me up to today. So I don't know if you all saw, right, but I am very proud of Tucker Carlson. I've never met Tucker Carlson, but my friend Tara Reid, who's spoken at CPI events, she's a good friend of Tucker Carlson's. She got Tucker Carlson to cover the Uhuru case before he was taken off the air on Fox. And I mean, Tucker Carlson is amazing. And if you don't understand how important Tucker Carlson is, I want you to take a look at this, right? Tucker Carlson went to Israel as a respected Republican conservative, and he interviewed Mike Huckabee. And Mike Huckabee is, he's a Christian Zionist. He's from Arkansas, former governor of Arkansas, big supporter of Israel, huge supporter of Israel. And they had a back and forth interview that was quite dramatic. But in the interview, Mike Huckabee said the following words. And if he had just said this, we would all just go, yeah, of course, right? I mean, we all know that Mike Huckabee is a big supporter of Israel, but he's also the U.S. ambassador to Israel. And in the interview, Tucker Carlson pressed the U.S. ambassador to Israel, right? A U.S. government representative, like the official representative of the American government in Israel. He pressed him to say this. This is part of what happened in the interview, and this is unbelievable. Here we go.
Appealed to Genesis. Genesis 15 says it's Abram, it's pre-Abraham, it's Abram, receives from God the news that his descendants will inherit the land, and you tell me as the theologian if I'm getting this wrong, but from the Euphrates to the Nile. I think that's right. And that would include basically the entire Middle East. That would be the Levant. So that would be Israel, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon. It would also be big parts of Saudi Arabia and Iraq. It would be,
I'm not sure it would go that far. I mean, it would be a big piece of land, but here's the point.
It would be a lot of places that are now countries.
But this particular area that we're talking about now, Israel, is a land that God gave through Abraham to a people that he chose. It was a people, a place, and a purpose. We can look at it that way. Christian Zionism, I want to go back because that's where we started.
I'm not going to let you off on this because you have said it 3 times that God gave this land to this people. And so it is entirely fair for me with respect to ask, what land are you talking about? Because I just read Genesis 15, as I have many times. Mm-hmm. And that land, I think it says, from the Nile to the Euphrates, which is, once again, basically the entire Middle East. So God gave that land to his people, the Jews, or he didn't. You're saying he did. What does that mean? Does Israel have the right to that land? Because you're appealing to Genesis. Yeah. You're saying that's the original deed.
It would be fine if they took it all.
It would be fine if they took it all. Now, again, if Mike Huckabee had just said that as a pastor who supports Israel, no one would care. If Mike Huckabee had just said that at a pro-Israel rally, no one would care. If Mike Huckabee had said that as a Republican presidential candidate, which he did say similar things. He never really had a chance at the polls. He wasn't very popular among Republicans. No one would care. But he said that as the official U.S. ambassador to Israel. So now all these Middle Eastern countries are speaking up and saying, wait a second. The USA just said Israel has the right to conquer the entire Middle East from the Nile to the Euphrates River, right? Let's put a map on here. I want you all to see Nile to Euphrates, right? I want you all to see how far that is from the Nile River to the Euphrates River, right? So I'm going to pull up. This is the Middle East, right? I'm just going to show you what we're talking about here, because this is a really big deal, right? If you look at a map, right? Got to pull up a map, right? There's a place you want to go. I'm the one you need to know. I'm the map. Now, the Nile River is over here, and the Euphrates River is over there. Look at that map. Now, they're basically saying that from the part of Egypt where the Nile River is located, all the way up to Iraq, all of Saudi Arabia, all of Syria, all of Jordan, all of that belongs to Israel. Now, and he said he'd be fine with Israel seizing all of that territory. Now, there are governments in that region that have diplomatic relations with the United States, but yet the U.S. ambassador to Israel said he was fine if Israel conquered all of them. We get our oil from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a major supplier of our oil. And our ambassador just said he would be fine with them seizing all of Saudi Arabia's territory. We have diplomatic relations, friendly relations with the government of Jordan. If you look at that map, the U.S. ambassador to Israel just said he would be fine with all of Jordan being seized by Israel. This is dangerous stuff. And as a diplomat, you can't be saying that. And that might be Mike Huckabee's opinion based on his religious interpretation of the Bible. He believes that the book of Genesis still applies. That's what he believes. He believes that what is written in the book of Genesis, that God gave the land of Canaan to Israel, he believes that has never been rescinded. And it's like a lot has happened since then, right? There was the whole, they went to Egypt, according to the Bible. There was the Babylonian captivity. There was the conquest by the Romans. There's a really long list of things that have happened. The temple was torn down, but apparently, no, what was written in the book of Genesis is for all time eternal, right? That is, and he said that not just as a pastor, but as a representative of the American government. That's really dangerous. But Mike Huckabee forced him to say that and say out loud what he really believes. And as a result, all kinds of governments around the world are saying that's unacceptable. No, Israel does not have the right to conquer Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Egypt. No. And that's good. That's brilliant on Mike Huckabee's part. Make him say the loud part out loud. Make him say the loud part out loud. I thought that was great. I thought Tucker Carlson has made an amazing contribution, right? Tucker Carlson spoke up for the Uhuru movement. He laughed with Chairman O'Malley. That was absolutely beautiful. I'm going to put that on because, the Uhuru movement, they were charged with being agents of Russia by the American government, and the left just betrayed them. We at CPI, we stood with the Uhuru movement like nobody else. And because we're friends with Tara Reid, right? Tucker Carlson not only supported the Uhuru movement, he ended up doing an interview with them. And here we have Tucker Carlson talking to someone I deeply, deeply admire, Chairman O'Malley of the Uhuru movement, right? Talking with Tucker Carlson. And even though Tucker Carlson is a lifelong conservative, and even though Chairman O'Malley is an African-American socialist, the two of them talked, and it was absolutely beautiful. And there was a beautiful, beautiful moment in their conversation. I don't know why YouTube is being weird, but I will get the clip for you. Hold on. I'll just show you. Tucker Carlson plays a really important role. The people who voted for Trump because they wanted him to end the wars and are now continuing to take their anti-war stance. People like Marjorie Taylor Greene, people like Tucker Carlson, people like Thomas Massey, people like Candace Owens. They are the most important people right now. That's the constituency in America that we need to speak to. This is Tucker Carlson and Chairman O'Malley of the African People's Socialist Party laughing it up together. This is amazing.
But I'm confused. So you're describing basically what the Black Lives Matter people said 4 years ago. Some of them got legit rich out of it. You don't seem like you've gotten rich. And they got all this money from Apple, the biggest companies in the world. And of course, the media cheerled them. How did you miss out on that?
Well, because the thing is, like, to say Black Lives Matter is such an empty slogan. It's a whine rather than a demand. It's empty. I mean, Joe Biden says Black Lives Matter. I mean, you got the whole Democratic Party, Congress and whatever, get out on one knee with kente cloth from Ghana over their shoulder saying Black Lives Matter, because it doesn't mean anything. It's a non-statement. But what we say is Black people have to have power. So we want power over our own life. That's the question. And that's the basis for the difference in how they would treat Black Lives Matter and how they would treat us. And you're right. The Black Lives Matter slogan is almost a Zuckerberg manufactured slogan. Certainly if it's not manufactured by Zuckerberg, it's certainly promoted by Zuckerberg and all the white people who love us.
Yeah. Yeah, that was utterly amazing. And Tucker Carlson plays a really important role. Look, I guess I will briefly, I wasn't even planning to do this, but I will briefly, put on this video about the Uhuru case, because the Uhuru case was really important because it really separated, those who are serious and those who are loyal and committed and those who are not. It was really, really important. And so, this is when I was down in Florida for the opening of their trial. That happened. This is when I visited the Uhuru house the day before their trial opened in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is near Tampa. And so, I'm going to put this on. And then we will continue. I'll continue reading from my new book, Mystical Stalinism. And then from there, we'll do the roll call and I'll answer some questions. So if you have something for the second half of the show, if there's something you would like me to address, please send a Buy Me a Coffee. That's the best way to send it, is via Buy Me a Coffee. Rumble rants, you can send a Rumble rant if you're on the Rumble. That works. Or you can cash at me, Caleb Moffitt 22. But the best way to send it is Buy Me a Coffee. We got 2 Buy Me a Coffees already lined up, which I'm looking forward to answering. So yeah, let's put on, we'll put on the Uhuru case, and then from there, I will read to you all. And then we will go from there. So here we go. This is the Uhuru house. And the rally here is in response to the fact that the People's Democratic Uhuru movement has been charged as being Russian agents. The trial begins Tuesday, September 3rd. And it is alleged that their activism in the Black community is somehow acting as a foreign agent of Russia. It's a very dangerous case with very extreme implications for freedom of speech, freedom to protest, freedom to be anti-war here in the United States. It was a beautiful rally that was held. Here are some of the highlights of that demonstration.
Come on, put your hands together and stomp your feet. Come on and praise the
Lord. Yeah, we've been messing with each other for a very long time. This is CPI. This is Caleb Moffitt and John. This is our guy John.
Hey, Thank you so much.
CPI and his Green Party. These people are out.
He's Green Party.
This is just sort of a research lab that opened up some.
Well, I look at this is where I'm going.
This is ways. This is ways. She's Secretary General.
As was stated, my name is Jesse Neville. I am also a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee and the chair of our mass organization. And I am also one of the Uhuru Three, along with Chairwoman Penny Hess and our leader, Chairman Omali Shatella. And many of you have probably seen the video footage of what this very parking lot and area and staging ground where we are right now looked like on July 29th of 2022. It was filled with FBI agents, dozens, and if not over 100 FBI agents with vans, with armored vehicles, with battering rams, with flashbang grenades. At this location here in St. Petersburg, at the home of Director Akil Anai, who also want to salute, at the home of Chairman Amalia Shatella and Deputy Chair, as well as at their home in St. Louis, to have that many FBI agents and that many assault rifles when they could have sent one guy with a briefcase and a little badge and a warrant to say, I'm here to execute a search warrant. They did that because they wanted to intimidate Chairman Amalia Shatella. And think about that.
On Tuesday, you have this trial coming up. You know, what sparked this, and what is the message you really want to get across?
The message is that black people have agency, that we don't require anybody to tell us that we are oppressed. We are not employees of Russia. And I think the big problem is that the U.S. government has is that we won't be employees of the U.S. government. We are free people. We are fighting for the freedom of African people.
There's only one interest for imperialism and colonialism, and it's seated right in Washington, D.C., whoever is sitting in the White House. So we got to understand that. So we just came to be here with y'all, and to be here with Comrade O'Malley, and the party, and the movement, and the supporters, because this is where we needed to be.
This morning you oughta clap your hands. Come on, put your hands together and stomp your feet.
So we got to find out what's happened. So they made me read Marx. They forced me to read Lenin. They forced me to look at Trotsky and all the others who represented what was characterized as scientific revolution. And it was helpful. I read Marx. And having read Marx, I came to damn different conclusions about so much using the science that Marx provided. Because Marx told us, he said, you have to have an understanding of how capitalism came into existence. He said, in order for there to be capitalist production, there must be accumulation of capital. He said, but how do you get an accumulation of capital if there's no capitalist production? He said, the only way we can get out of this is to presuppose that there was an accumulation of capital that preceded the production, capitalist production. He said that accumulation of capital came about as a consequence of turning Africa into a warren for the commercial hunting of black skins. He said it came and tearing the indigenous people in this land into the mines, bringing up gold and silver and what have you for the Europeans. He said it had to do with the attack that was going on at what they call East India at the time. We're talking about the India in that particular area of South Asia. Hell, he just described the mode of production. That is a mode of production for the first time in history with the enslavement of African people, with the attack on Africa, the Portuguese. 600 years we've been fighting this struggle. 600 years ago, 1415.
I have a question. If Jesse and Penny and the chairman are foreign agents, then who are the elected officials who are receiving money from AIPAC? Are they not foreign agents also? Why aren't they going after them? The hypocrisy of this government is absolutely, it makes you want to toss your cookies, to coin a phrase, okay?
People understand what this means in terms of the threat to free speech of everybody. So that's why people are here, and that's why we are here. So we expect many, many more people to arrive here, and people like Charles Barron, who you may know for years and years was on the city council in New York and the state assembly in New York.
Turning 50 plus years old, I can't keep singing outside on the street corners. And then someone told me there was a new radio station called Black Power. I said, they called my name. Black Power. They called my name. I'm black and I got power. So I wanted to go out, and I came and I said, I want to be a DJ. And I never forget the person that was here, manager at the time, say, you want to be a DJ? I said, yeah. He said, aren't you blind? I said, yes, I am. He said, well, I don't know if you can do it. I said, well, give me a chance, man. Give me a chance. And he said, He said, okay, I guess I'll give you a chance. And Deputy Chair, she urged me on. And next thing you know, I was playing music and I was DJing and I was finding love for my community. And they was finding love for me, most importantly.
Okay, CPI is honored to be here because we understand how important this case is. What's at stake is not just a life sentence for Chairman O'Malley. What's at stake is a death sentence for humanity. Because imperialism has pushed us to the brink of a world-ending nuclear war between the United States and Russia. And what these demons are saying with this prosecution is that it's illegal to organize to try to stop that war. And it's illegal to even talk about it. That's right. Go ahead. And we got to talk about it. We got to organize against it because it's a threat to everybody. We're not here defending Chairman O'Malley. He's defending us, our children, everyone we've ever met, and anyone we ever will meet from a world-ending war. From imperialism to colonialism and the final war that they're leading us to. So we have to do everything we can to help him win that fight. We got to do it like our life depends on it, because it does.
This is a case that's using law in pursuit of political objectives, that this is a political trial. These are political charges that they're making against us, and they're using the law. So we have incredibly good lawyers who will represent us in the court.
There's not really much that I can add, but I just want to turn around and say, look what Chairman O'Malley built. Look what Chairman O'Malley built. Look what Chairman O'Malley built. Chairman O'Malley is not a hashtag revolutionary. He's a cement and bricks revolutionary. He is a builder, and he constructs and he lifts people up. And we look on him with absolute admiration for what he has done and what he has accomplished and why they are targeting him. Yeah, that's right. And I must say, if you look at what they're doing, this is a test case. They have already raided the home of Scott Ritter. They just recently targeted Danny Shaw, the journalist, at the airport when he was coming back to the United States. And they have gone as far as to prosecute Sue Mi Terry, the top Korea scholar, a longtime shill, just because South Korea won't go along with the provocations against North Korea that the United States is demanding. There is all kinds of abuse and efforts to impose and utilize the Foreign Agents Registration Act in the works. There have been calls to prosecute organizations that march for Palestine under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. And this is a test case. And that is why standing up and taking this to trial and saying that you will not surrender is so important. It's really important. And we should all look in absolute admiration to Chairman O'Malley, to the Uhuru 3, and all that they are doing. And I must say that Chairman O'Malley is a builder. And that's why he has been targeted, is because he has built and he has constructed. And if you look at what their system is doing, monopolistic capitalism is in a wrecking, destructive period. But we are builders. We are people of the land. We are fighting back. We are resisting. We resist their global system based on fake wealth and usury and global domination of world markets. And we stand for building and construction and popular power. Thank you very much.
And if, in fact, this trial is based on law and the Constitution, we'll win it, hands down. But the problem is that it's political, and so therefore is extremely important for the people who are the most incredible, most significant factor in any kind of political situation, the people. And so that's what's really important, for the people to come forward and say that we recognize that black people have been historically oppressed in this country. The Russians didn't have to tell us that.
The party, the chairman has stood with every struggle. We recently found a photograph of Janeva's father, the incredible Biko Lumumba, speaking at a rally in support of Leonard Peltier in about in San Francisco in about 1983, 84, the party stood with Leonard Peltier for his freedom then, who has been in prison for 50 years on his own stolen land. So I just want to say we are confident. We want everybody to be there who can. The trial starts next Tuesday. It is powerful to see the people. And we, it's just, we will win. We will win. Only the people can win this. Salute to Chairman Amala Shatella, Deputy Chair on this nation, telling the African People's Socialist Party.
And I'm saying this as somebody who's a communist. I'm as Comrade Charles Barry knows. I'm a materialist. You understand? I'm a materialist. But saying I'm a materialist does not keep me from appreciation of what we've seen here today. Because African people came to Christianity for different reasons. African people came to Christianity because it was the religion of the oppressed. Right. That's why there's go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land, tell Pharaoh, let my people go. You weren't hearing that in the white church. You were hearing that in the church of the oppressed. And that's the thing that brought us to this relationship with these wonderful people who bring the culture, African culture. We've had to learn how to even sing songs and express our feelings in ways that's not necessarily obvious to the oppressor. When Harriet Tubman come in the middle of the night to get the people, what she say? Steal away, steal away. And Africans understood exactly what that means. It's time to bounce. You understand? And so people got together and did exactly that. So that's our relationship. That's a different Christianity than what Trump is talking about. That's a different Christianity than what Biden is talking about. That's a religion that's facing resistance. That's the way we approach that.
I go to the movies and I go downtown. Somebody always telling me no.
Also, did I say anything about the Center for Political Innovation? I want to, because these comrades were some of the first out of the gate. When this attack happened, they were first out of the gate. They didn't ask any questions or anything like that. They were the first out of the gate, and not only in words. They began to take actions everywhere they were located. We can see the actions they were involved in, defending the Uhuru 3 and opposed to what the FBI was doing to us, trying to do to us. And they understood the relationship that it had to the whole question of free speech for everybody. In Brooklyn, New York, the first tribunal on reparations for African people, the first world tribunal where we use international law, including the Genocide Convention. This is so wild because they charged us with being under the leadership of the Russians around genocide. And Comrade John had a splendid response to that. He said the guy who, the Russian we're supposed to be working for, was only 7 years old when we had that conviction, so they've done some time trial, in Russia to be able to make that, that claim. But I just wanted to say that the CPI, John, and then Caleb and John, Center for Political Innovation. I saw Caleb in this video, Comrade Caleb, and he was on a platform. Vladimir Putin, President Putin, was on the stage, and Caleb was in the audience, and he raised his hand and was recognized. And he said that what was happening with the Uhuru 3, and that they were using the Russia kind of thing as the basis for that, and he put it before them, and I thought that was really powerful and really good.
Things between. Anyhow, you've all seen that video before, I'm sure, or, it's widely available. But anyway, I just wanted to show you all that because I'm really proud of the work that we have done to support the Uhuru movement, the People's Democratic Uhuru movement, and their struggle as they faced persecution for opposing World War III against Russia, standing with Russia in Ukraine. So I had a couple other things I was going to mention, but yeah, if you all have anything for me to talk about in the second half of the show, the best thing to do would be to send a buy me a coffee. We would really appreciate that. So yeah, buy me a coffee is the best way to send it. I had a couple other things I was going to mention before I start reading from the book, and then we'll do the roll call, and then I'll answer people's questions for the second half of the show. Shout out to Max Perry, who posted this on Facebook. I saw this brilliant, right? Old Soviet joke about the USA. A Soviet and an American are seated next to each other on a plane, traveling from Moscow to Washington, D.C. The American says, "I have to hand it to you. Your propaganda is very impressive." The Soviet smiles and thanks him, but replies, "That's it. That it is. Nothing compared to American propaganda." Confused, the American tells him, "But we don't have any propaganda." The Soviet smiles and says, "Exactly." That's a great joke. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. I think that's a brilliant joke. It's a smart joke. You got to think about it, right? But yeah. It really just kind of explains the American mindset. Believe the American television, or you're just brainwashed, right? We don't have any propaganda in America. No, other countries do. Yeah. I thought this was very, very brilliant and needed to be shared, needed to be pointed out, because, it's just, there you go. But the other thing I did want to mention is that I did attend and participate in a rally. You saw that we supported the Uhuru movement when they were under attack for their work, bringing peace around the world, being friendly toward Russia. Well, Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, the widow of the Reverend Sun Myung Moon, is in prison right now in South Korea. And she's in detention as her trial on a bogus bribery charge is taking place. And so in the snow, amid a snowstorm yesterday, I was in the streets with the Manhattan Family Church community and other religious and community leaders to speak up about Dr. Hak Jahan's persecution. So I wanted to show this video. And then after that, we'll start reading from the book, and then I'll answer questions in the second half of the show. So I just wanted to show you all this video of this is where I was yesterday afternoon.
Please release the mother of peace. Please release the mother of peace. Please release the mother of peace. Please release the mother of peace.
Turned out nice, huh? Like the sign?
Yeah, so we're gonna hold the signs, and we're gonna walk together as before.
But we're gonna brave the snow.
Brave the snow because we're committed to the release of our Holy Mother, huh?
My mother.
Anyone else coming? Parents of heaven and earth, humankind, good afternoon. The Good Spirit world here in New York. Today we are going now to express our heart of support as true children of filial piety, to our true mother, to really speak up, to support. And we know that she is carrying the burden, she's carrying our cross. And we are so repentful. We repent for that. But what we can do is, even if we cannot replace her in the detention center, but we can go out and express our support and express our heart to her, to the world.
Please release the mother of peace. 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 Because there is no reason for her, a woman of 83 years old, to be held in detention. Release her. That will be your liberation. That will be your freedom. That will be known in history that you did the right thing at the right time. Religion is being attacked. Christianity is being attacked. You say, well, how? In America? No.
in South Korea.
Almighty God, our beloved Creator, the source of light, mercy, and justice, we come before you with humble hearts, praying for the release of Mother Moon.
We come together to really unite in prayer and resonance, Heavenly Parents. We pray that we can really raise the spiritual atmosphere here in New York so that all your heavenly works can be done and completed, Heavenly Parents. I thank you. May our prayers be received, and may us really come together in unity as one family serving on you, so that we can really resonate and mobilize heaven to really support us at this time, so that your good and heavenly works can be done, Heavenly Parents. I thank you. Mother Hon, I pray for your good health and protection at this time. May you be released so that you can continue your work of peace, Heavenly Parents. Mother, I pray for your safety. I pray for those that attend you now at this time.
What South Korea, the President Lee is doing is really outrageous, egregious, very terrible what he's doing. It's against the law what he's doing. And Mother Moon was never convicted of any crime.
She traveled the world to the most important places to give hope and joy where there was none. She worked to heal the wounds of slavery, one of the biggest human exploitation in history.
And every project that Reverend Moon and Mrs. Moon undertook in the world was for the sake of the world, to think that true mother, Dr. Hak Ja Han Moon, will seek some favor in one way or another is a mistaken understanding of the role the Moon family have played in the world in serving the world.
She is concerned with the future of humanity. That is why she created the Shanghai Peace Prize. The hardworking people who are silently working to secure the future of humanity in terms of developing new techniques in different fields, such as agriculture for food security.
The voice of conscience on behalf of our true mother, Hak Ja Han, who at present is under detention for no fault of her own. We repent that we ourselves are insufficient in doing what is necessary.
That's right.
So that these kinds of activities do not occur.
That's right.
We know from the very beginning that we lost our original parent.
That's right.
And the struggle between brothers has been a continuous reality in human history.
That's right. Right.
Killing each other.
All right. Please release the Mother of Peace.
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 I just want to reflect for a moment. My name is Caleb Maupin. I'm with the Center for Political Innovation. I just want to reflect for a moment about the tragedy that Dr. Hak Ja Han is locked away right now, facing these false charges, because this is a time when the world needs her the most. They need her in the Middle East right now, and they need her message of peace and reconciliation. They need her in Eastern Europe right now, and they need her message of peace and reconciliation. They need her in Asia right now and in the Pacific, and they need her message of peace and reconciliation. The world is crying out for the work that she has done to bring people together, to bring nations together, to bring forgiveness and reconciliation. And I think about what she was able to help happen on the Korean Peninsula when President Donald Trump in his first term was able to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And I think about if she was not in a prison cell right now facing these charges, how she could be helping us to work towards peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula.
That's right.
And because North Korea and Russia are very close, that process is deeply tied in with peace in Ukraine, getting a resolution of the conflict that can end the killing there. All over the world, people are crying out for her message, and that is why she must be released.
She is 83 years of age in a detention center, and these are the words of a psalm, and our heavenly parent is taking care of his daughter.
Where there is confinement, bring freedom for her. Where there is fear, bring peace. Where there is uncertainty, bring assurance from Mother Moon. Where there is heaviness in her heart, make it light.
This is an atrocity, injustice, and we have to somehow do everything we can.
She's persevering. She is bearing her indemnity, and she's persevering for the sake of mankind, for the sake of you and me.
And I think it's a mistake that the South Korean government have placed Mrs. Moon, Dr. Hak Ja-han Moon, in prison. It had to reconsider her case, especially considering her age. A public work is far surpasses any other accusation that can go against her.
Amen.
Ready? Yeah. In recognition, Hanul Pumanim! Jump Pumanim! For the liberation of our Holy Mother Han!
Land that I love, stand beside her and guide her through the light with the night from above, from the mountain, through the prairie, through the ocean, while we fall. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Yeah. So people were out in the streets supporting Dr. Hak Ja-han. And I was there with them representing CPI. Very proud to be there. Please retweet that video. I've been linking all the different videos I've done about Iran and all that. Just we gotta up our X presence, so to speak, and it was good to see a lot of people promoting the video that I did about asking the U.S. State Department about Israel's nuclear weapons. So yeah, let's you can retweet this if you want. But anyhow, so I'm gonna start reading from my new book, Mystical Stalinism. We've been gradually making our way through the book. We're about halfway through. So before I do that, quick reminder: it is you guys that make the second half of the show happen. Buy me a coffee is the best way to send questions for me to answer in the second half of the show. I can talk about whatever you want. So send me questions. Rumble Rants, Caleb Hoffman 22 and Cash App. Buy me a coffee is the best way to send questions for the second half of the show. So yeah, I'm just going to read a chapter or two from this book, and then from there we'll do the roll call, and then I'll start answering people's questions. So here we go. This is my new book, Mystical Stalinism, and we left off at the beginning. We're going to start with chapter 11, The Roots of the New Left. What can be called the New Left originates among a group of Trotskyites and ex-Trotskyites assembled to oppose the Soviet Union's Waldorf Peace Conference in 1949. Sidney Hook, Irving Kristol, and a slew of others got CIA money to oppose this important gathering in New York City, featuring Shostakovich, Lillian Hellman, Will Geer, Albert Einstein, and Aaron Copland. Most of those hired were from the New York intellectuals, who broke with Leon Trotsky in 1939, just before his death, on the basis of opposing his position that the USSR was a degenerated workers' state, and instead arguing that it was bureaucrat collectivism or state capitalism, the same system as Nazi Germany. Equating the USSR with Nazi Germany was a popular fixation of this collection of anti-communist intellectuals. Hannah Arendt had written her screeds about totalitarianism. Mary McCarthy had echoed their sentiments. Susan Sontag and Theodore Adorno had made their careers expounding on this. Their critique of the Soviet Union was aesthetic. They did not simply hate Stalin. They hated social realist art that glorified ordinary people as heroes. They hated Shostakovich music that glowed with optimism. They hated the films of Sergei Eisenstein. They particularly loathed the brilliant aesthetics of the Popular Front era. They wanted abstract art and 12-tone music that made people feel disoriented. They wanted pessimistic films and novels that left the readers confused, not inspired to take action to better humanity. Stalin changed the global communist movement in a spiritual and aesthetic way, moving it away from the politics of rebellion and libidinal release toward a message of celebrating human solidarity, mobilizing construction, and uniting the different races and nations. The new left that was consciously created by the U.S. intelligence apparatus starting in 1949 embraced the aesthetic Stalin had broken with and sought to mix in with it an element of lassitude and moral relativism. Theodore Adorno's authoritarian personality study, sponsored by the British social researchers linked to the Tavistock Institute, as well as various Jewish foundations interested in the roots of the Holocaust, was widely circulated. The text claims there is a certain type of person who has the psychological makeup that predisposes them to join a mass movement. Often this person carries resentment against a father figure, longs for community and connection, and finds fulfillment in religious ceremonies or group efforts as a youth. Adorno, while claiming to be a Marxist, blames the rise of Hitler not on the breakdown of capitalism, but on this dangerous personality type. He drew from the crackpot psychoanalyst guru Wilhelm Reich, who argued that the Nazi movement was entirely rooted in sexual repression. Adorno argued that to prevent events like those of the Second World War, the focus of academia and the cultural sphere should be on opposing this type of personality that leads people to become not just potential Nazis, but also communists or Catholics or adherents of mass movements of some kind. Hannah Arendt's text Eichmann in Jerusalem, a study in the banality of evil, makes similar arguments, portraying the Nazi war criminal executed by Israel for his central role in the Holocaust as being an ordinary, unoriginal German, representing the evil found deep within ordinary people. The Jewish community of the world was emerging from the trauma of one of the most horrific events in human history, in which 6 million Jews were killed. However, in the work of Adorno, Arendt, Sontag, and so many of these CIA-funded new leftist academics, we find a long-standing sentiment among the Jewish community, rooted perhaps in the Talmudic belief system. While the Jewish religion has a huge number of different interpretations, among Orthodox Jews, a common belief is that all people were presented with the Torah, the Mosaic law, by God, but they are the only nation that accepted it. As a result, they will always become the target of Gentiles who seek to disobey God and live according to their own desires and want to exterminate Jews in order to protect their freedom from divine authority. Leon Abrams, a European Marxist who died in the Holocaust, composed an important book called On the Jewish Question. In the text, he argues that the Jewish people of Europe were artificially preserved as a separate identity to serve a role in feudal society, mainly as money lenders and merchants. Whenever Jews ceased to serve this purpose throughout the Dark Ages, they were absorbed into Christianity. Quote, "The law of assimilation might be formulated as follows. Wherever Jews cease to be a class, more or less rapidly their ethnic, religious, and linguistic characteristics, they become assimilated. Throughout medieval history, Jews had a dual existence, both privileged and free from many of the restrictions faced by the Christian population, but also subjected to horrendous persecution as scapegoats in economic hard times." Quote, "The relative abundance of money enabled the nobility to throw off the yoke of the usurer. The Jews were driven from one country to another. Others became assimilated, being absorbed mainly by the native bourgeoisie. Certain countries, principally in Germany and Italy, the Jews became the primary loan makers to the popular masses, the peasants and the artisans. In this role as petty usurers, exploiting the people, they were often victims of bloody uprisings. In general, the period of medieval capitalism was that of the most violent Jewish persecutions. Jewish capital came into conflict with all the classes of society." Marx was of Jewish heritage, but felt a need to compose a very pointed essay denouncing Jewish culture in 1844. Quote, let us not look for the secret of the Jew in his religion, but let us look for the secret of his religion in the real Jew. What is the secular basis of Judaism? Practical need, self-interest. What is the worldly religion of the Jew? Huckstering. What is his worldly god? Money. Very well then, emancipation from huckstering and money, consequently from practical real Judaism, would be the self-emancipation of our time. In the infamous piece, Marx went on to argue that feudalism was overturned by capitalism. Values that had been associated with Jews were becoming more or less universal. Quote, the Jew has emancipated himself in a Jewish manner, not only because he has acquired financial power, but also because through him, and also apart from him, money has become a world power. And the practical Jewish spirit has become the practical spirit of the Christian nations. The Jews have emancipated themselves insofar as Christians have become Jews. In these crude words, what we find in Marx is that though he was Jewish, he rejected any notion of preserving or celebrating a Jewish identity or trying to create a Jewish nationality. Similar, though not as pointed, repudiations of Jewishness can be found in the works of almost all the major Marxists of the coming decades. Rosa Luxemburg wrote, I have no special corner of the heart for the ghetto. I feel at home in the entire world, wherever there are clouds and birds and human tears. As capitalism emerged from feudalism, and feudalism was being overturned, the dying feudal aristocracy proclaimed the whole thing to be a sinister conspiracy by the Jews. Jews, after all, were the moneylenders, so the ripping apart of feudal hierarchies and the replacing of it with naked self-interest must be their doing, they supposed. But most historians acknowledge there was nothing particularly ethnic about the emergence of capitalism. In the areas where feudalism held on to a significant degree, amid the rise of capitalism elsewhere, talk of an evil conspiracy was used to explain the turmoil and unrest created by the modern world. In Russia, a text entitled The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion was circulated as supposed proof that calls for universal male suffrage, the formation of labor unions, and many progressive reforms emerging was all a plot by a secret Jewish World Council that sought to conquer the world. As peasants became furious with their conditions and demanded their democratic rights, a movement called the Black Hundreds Party was fomented to redirect their anger toward the Jews. The Black Hundreds functioned much like the Ku Klux Klan Night Riders in the United States. They terrorized Jewish communities with violent riots called pogroms. Vladimir Lenin, it should be noted, urged the Bolsheviks to go and recruit Black Hundred supporters away from racism and anti-Semitism and towards socialism. He recalled in his book, Left-Wing Communism, An Infantile Disorder, quote, however, when Zabatov, agent of the secret police, organized Black Hundred worker assemblies and working men's societies for the purpose of trapping revolutionaries and combating them, we sent members of our party to these assemblies and into these societies, and they established contact with the masses and were able to carry on their agitation and succeeded in wresting workers from the influence of Zabatov's agents. Especially in the years leading up to the revolution, these efforts were successful. Many former Black Hundreds became Bolsheviks, shedding their anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and conservatism for revolutionary Marxism. Among Jews in Russia, many Jewish revolutionaries felt they could never integrate with Gentiles, and a trend called Bundism emerged, arguing Jews had to form a separate revolutionary organization. Vladimir Lenin, himself of Jewish heritage, was the harshest opponent of Bundism, arguing that workers of all nationalities should form a single revolutionary party. Lenin wrote, that is precisely what the Jewish problem amounts to, assimilation or isolation. The idea of a Jewish nationality is definitely reactionary, not only when expounded by its consistent advocates, the Zionists, but otherwise on the lips of those who try to combine it with the ideas of social democracy, the Bundists. The idea of a Jewish nationality runs counter to the interests of the Jewish proletariat, for it fosters among them directly or indirectly a spirit hostile to assimilation, the spirit of the ghetto. Throughout the world, Marxism and socialism were the clear majority viewpoint among Jews, and the Zionist movement was acutely aware of this. Theodor Herzl made many appeals to the British imperialists and others for support, seeing his nationalist movement to establish settlements in Palestine as a way to divert Jews away from communism. Winston Churchill was among the Western imperialist leaders who saw Zionism as necessary to support as a form of opposition to communism. It was not until the Holocaust and the horrendous events of the Second World War that Zionism had the support of most Jews in the world. The Bolsheviks rejected Zionism, and Stalin described it in his text on the national question as a reactionary trend of the Jewish bourgeoisie. The British imperialists very much saw cultivating Zionism as in their interest, in particular as a way of combating communism. Winston Churchill explained, quote, "Zionism offers a third sphere to the political conception of the Jewish race. The struggle which is now beginning between the Zionist and Bolshevik Jews is little less than a struggle for the soul of the Jewish people." While the Bolsheviks rejected Zionism, they also rejected anti-Semitism. Zionism and anti-Semitism both share a common narrative about a special group of chosen people who magically have great achievements, but are also constantly subject to widespread hatred and suspicion. Zionists celebrate this, and anti-Semites decry it as a conspiracy, but both of them are delusional. In the anti-populism of new left thinkers, most of them Trotskyites and New York intellectuals funded by American intelligence to oppose the Soviet Union in leftist terms, we see a revival of the spirit of the ghetto. The masses of people are presented as a vulgar mob of hateful bigots to be manipulated by demagogues and tyrants who would suppress freedom. Joe McCarthy, Joseph Stalin, and Adolf Hitler are all just representatives of the evil found within the hearts of mankind, or perhaps in the hearts of Goyim. Postmodernism and eventually neoconservatism emerged from this pessimistic intellectual mess. The belief that no truth exists and those who seek to present truth are totalitarian. The belief that deconstruction and muddying waters into confusion is the righteous act of the modern intellectual. All of this is called philosophical irrationalism. It predates the New Left and was first presented by Nietzsche in his screeds about the Übermensch, condemning compassion and human solidarity. The Nazis bastardized these teachings to build their movement, but did not accurately represent it. After all, the Nazis were building a mass movement and teaching certain principles as truths. Philosophical irrationalism rejects all truth, seeking to atomize all movements and collectivism in the celebration of the great individual. As the New Left of the 1960s replaced organized Marxism-Leninism in the West, the message was not a call for the working class majority to organize society and seize the means of production. It was instead the need for people to think for themselves and question authority, as Timothy Leary put it, along with his mantra of tune in, turn on, and drop out. The enemy was not capitalism and its irrational tendency to create poverty amid plenty, but fascists and pigs who suppressed creativity and individuality. We'll read one more chapter, and then I'll do the roll call and start answering people's questions. Chapter 12, Modern Revisionism in America. Steve Nelson recalls the reading of Khrushchev's secret speech to a closed National Committee meeting of the Communist Party in 1956. Quote, "The words of the speech were like bullets. Each found its place in the heart of veteran communists. Tears streamed down the faces of men and women who had spent 40 or more years, the whole of their adult lives, in the movement. I looked into the faces of people who'd been beaten up or jailed with me and thought of the hundreds I had encouraged to join the party. My head was swimming." There are aspects of the 1956 to 58 crisis within American communism that must be examined. Firstly, William Z. Foster, then an elderly man who had been the face of American communism during the Third Period, and who had recently led the fight against Earl Browder and his refusal to stand with the USSR as the Cold War began, almost immediately became the target of American de-Stalinization. Foster was considered the American Stalin, and defaming and denigrating his leadership of the party and opposing the way he was venerated was important for pivoting the Communist Party away from its powerful roots and into being an almost invisible wing of Cold War liberalism. Foster was never expelled, but he was forced into retirement as chairman emeritus. His allies were expelled or left the party and laid the foundations of the Maoist or anti-revisionist current with the Provisional Organizing Committee and subsequent formations. Secondly, To some degree, the US government was aware of Khrushchev's break with Stalin's political line, and the Communist Party was allowed to reemerge and function prior to the 1956 crisis. In 1951, the US Congress passed the McCarran Internal Security Act that required all Communist Party members to register and enabled the Department of Justice to make a list of 2 million people to be rounded up and placed in prison camps at the time of a national emergency. The Communist Party was functioning almost as an illegal underground organization at this point. Nelson Peary's autobiography, Black Radical, tells how he acquired a new Social Security card and moved to Youngstown, Ohio, to work under his new name, meeting once a week with a party contact at the public library. The Communist Party's newspapers were banned from the mail. The national headquarters of the Communist Party and its various properties around the country had been seized by the Department of Justice as part of the 1948 prosecution. The National Board was sent to federal prison after being convicted at the famous Foley Square Smith Act trial of 1948. Over 200 members of the party were imprisoned around the country for their membership in the party, many of them under state criminal communism laws. But after the death of Stalin and the execution of the Rosenbergs, it appears that the Communist Party, which was heavily infiltrated by the FBI and functioning under conditions of semi-illegality, began operating publicly, at least in New York City. Morris Childs, the top FBI informant within the party, was on the national board. Many of the party's top white organizers were expelled in an FBI-directed campaign against white chauvinism, and many of the top black organizers were expelled for alleged black nationalism. Memoirs of the era recall how this campaign was obviously orchestrated by the FBI, with Howard Fast recalling how he faced near expulsion for writing "little black boys and little black girls," end quote, in an article describing an event with an audience of prepubescent children. Nelson Peary recalls how black informants and white FBI collaborators teamed up to purge the party of its best organizers and activists. Quote, "The strongest rampart of the party was its historic work with and for the African American liberation. The FBI understood that this was their least defensible point. It was also a point of penetration into the party, and some of the most destructive work was done through black informers. Accusing a white comrade of white chauvinism or getting some black informer to do so was akin to a political lynching. For honest party members, the struggle against white chauvinism became a lose-lose situation." This kind of identity politics the FBI pushed within the Communist Party in the early 1950s would become a valuable weapon for the U.S. state in controlling and manipulating leftist politics decades later. It appears that the heavily purged and barely functioning Communist Party was allowed to open up an office on 23rd Street in Manhattan and begin holding public meetings, even before the 1957 Yates versus the United States Supreme Court ruling made it legal, as long as it did not advocate violence. The party was up and running, heavily watched and infiltrated by the FBI just before Khrushchev's secret speech. It's also important to acknowledge that the principles Nikita Khrushchev thundered in his 1956 secret speech on the cult of personality and its consequences were not his own original thoughts. These were the very ideas that had been boosted and in some cases cooked up by American intelligence. George Orwell's two anti-communist novels, Animal Farm and 1984, are now required reading in American schools. They are a special brand of anti-communism aimed at the kind of intellectual nonconformist who might become a communist. Communism is portrayed as groupthink, suppressing individual free thought. In the post-McCarthyism years, as U.S. Presidents Eisenhower, Kennedy, and Johnson led a Democratic Party that had near total political supremacy, and the right wing was tainted by McCarthyism and the John Birch Society, this new brand of anti-communism became standard. Dwight Eisenhower said his favorite book was Eric Hoffer's screed, The True Believer, which doesn't simply attack communism, but all mass movements as inherently dangerous. The CIA arranged for the book The God That Failed to be published, featuring the testimonies of ex-communists Richard Wright and Arthur Kessler, among others. They portrayed communism as a totalitarian movement that suppressed creativity and compared it to religion. Khrushchev's secret speech began after Stalin's death. The Central Committee of the party began to implement a policy of explaining concisely and consistently that it is impermissible and foreign to the spirit of Marxism-Leninism to elevate one person, to transform him into a superman possessing supernatural characteristics akin to those of a god. Such a man supposedly knows everything, sees everything, thinks for everyone, can do anything, and is infallible in all his behavior. Such a belief about a man, and specifically about Stalin, was cultivated among us for many years. This was CIA anti-totalitarianism, tapping into the Oedipal impulses that had drawn so many people to Marxism-Leninism. For people drawn to communism's rhetoric about the oppressed breaking their chains due to a subconscious desire to kill their fathers, Stalin was now presented as the tyrannical father to kill. While Stalin had reoriented the movement away from Oedipal and libidinal appeal, Khrushchev embraced these impulses and pointed them against his predecessor. The essence of what Khrushchev's revisionism was doing was pivoting the Soviet-aligned communist parties of the world into making themselves appendages of imperialism, just as the revisionist Marxism of Edward Bernstein and the Second International had been. In America, the political battle lines were between the ultra-rich, represented by the Rockefellers, the New England oil monopolists, the liberal foundations, and academic think tanks pushing against the military-industrial complex. Carol Quigley wrote extensively on this and on how the new money of military contractors and industrialists had weaponized McCarthyism to assert themselves against the Anglo-American establishment. Under Khrushchev's direction, in the name of world peace, communism in America liquidated into Cold War liberal apparatus. In New York City, this became quite blatantly obvious. Riverside Church in Harlem, near Columbia University, was built and paid for by the Rockefeller oil banking dynasty. In the late 1950s, it became a well-funded organizing center for ban the bomb petitions and peace parades facilitated by the Democrat Party. New York City peace parades of the early 1960s focused on condemning Republicans as dangerous warmongers amid the prayers of liberal clergymen. The politicians who spoke at them, often Democratic New York City mayors and Democratic congressmen, were not even really against the Vietnam War. Their focus was simply on the extremism of McCarthyism and vague platitudes about seeking peace and de-escalating the nuclear weapons tests. As the Vietnam War escalated, the Communist Party and Riverside Church labeled the protests of Students for a Democratic Society and the national mobilization to end the Vietnam War, led by Trotskyites and Maoists, as ultra-left. Instead, they formed a coalition called Negotiate Now that did not call for the end of the war, but simply demanded that Moscow and Washington have dialogue about the fate of a country in Indochina. The chair of Negotiate Now was Zbigniew Brzezinski, the Cold War strategist and anti-communist who led the International Studies program at Columbia. Though Negotiate Now was staffed by Communist Party members, most of them elderly folks nostalgic for the 1930s, anti-communist Cold War liberals ran the group. Khrushchev's American foot soldiers staffing Negotiate Now was a gesture or diplomatic favor. What Stalin did in the 1930s and 40s, tactically aligning with the democratic imperialists to defend the Soviet Union from fascism, was done very differently than Khrushchev's capitulation to liberalism. The communists knew they were carrying out a tactic. While they aligned with the anti-fascist liberals and even sounded like them during the Second World War, they were doing so on the basis of a political line, their own political line. As the Second World War was ending, Earl Browder was expelled from the Communist Party because he had gone too far in pandering to the U.S. government. The Communist Party accused Earl Browder of revisionism for watering down its belief to fit the United Nations alliance of the Second World War. 1948, the Communist Party had embraced the presidential campaign of Henry Wallace, the former vice president who broke with the Democratic Party and ran on a platform of opposing the Cold War and Jim Crow segregation as the Progressive Party candidate. Earl Browder condemned this 1948 election maneuver in a pamphlet called Chinese Lessons for American Marxists, claiming that Mao had been successful by aligning with Chiang Kai-shek and that breaking with the Democrats was dangerous opportunism. Starting with Khrushchev, the Communist Party USA joined with the rest of leftism in America, always siding with the Democrats against the Republicans and orienting itself not based on what the goals of anti-imperialist movement was globally, but rather on how it could fit into the section of U.S. politics called the left. Khrushchev's orientation of aligning with liberals in Western countries by claiming conservatives are fascists was a watered-down, oversimplified distortion of a correct policy consciously carried out by Stalin and the global communist movement decades earlier. As the anti-war movement grew and the Black liberation struggle expanded, the Communist Party was seen as holding back the struggle, insisting that leftists work to boost the liberal CIA. The trauma of McCarthyism and the fear of being too radical might provoke further persecution was certainly a factor, but the orientation largely came from Moscow. Détente meant liquidating the Communist Party into a kind of invisible, Moscow-funded network that amplified the sentiments of liberals who wanted better relations with the Soviet Union. This is the essence of revisionism. The first revisionist, Edward Bernstein, said, "The movement is everything, the goal is nothing," and argued that socialism was just the sum of reforms. He saw being a Marxist as nothing different than being a liberal and advocating day-to-day reforms to capitalism. The revisionism of the Second International was less obvious, but it revealed itself with the First World War. Though they preached a radical-sounding Marxist message, the various socialists of Europe ended up being a vehicle for marching European workers into an imperialist bloodbath. They were part of the Western political apparatus, not a force fighting against it. Modern revisionism is the term applied to Khrushchev and those who embraced his de-Stalinization campaign in the Soviet Union and capitulation to the United States internationally. Modern revisionism oriented communists to see themselves as part of the Western imperialist left, not an independent force opposing the Western system and engaging in whatever tactics may be necessary. Pretty much all communists in America have embraced this aspect of revisionism. The memo sent out during the Khrushchev era that Democrats are always better than Republicans and that being part of the movement and doing whatever is trendy among liberals is important regardless of its international implications. All right, so we're getting right through the book. Next is chapter 13, Cold War Anti-Revisionism. But yeah, we're speeding right ahead through the book. So yeah, that's my book, Mystical Stalinism and the Struggle Against Revisionism in America. It is an overview of the Communist Party's history, putting Stalin and his political leadership and the struggle against Stalin and what Bolshevism came out of, the struggle against revisionism in a wider context as a spiritual and mystical movement, etc. So I hope that you enjoy it. All right, folks. Now we're going to do the roll call. Penny's ahead of the game. Penny's already sent it in. We're going to do the roll call. Before we do that, I do want to remind you, if you have any questions to be sent in the second half of the show, please buy me a coffee is the best way to do it. Go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. That's the best way to send a question for the second half of the show. We also take Rumble rants, and you can cash at me at Caleb Maupin 22. All right, Penny in Minnesota, Jenny in Cincinnati, John McCarthy in Chicago. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Gabby in Chicago. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. All right. Paul in Minnesota, Dan in Los Angeles, St. David's, Bermuda, Punks of Australia, Bradley Briggs in Los Angeles. Good to see you. Good to see you. All right. We got Maddie in California, the South, Chris in Salt Lake City. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? We got names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Anybody else? Nick Squid in Gary, Indiana. And you sent a question which was received. Names and locations. Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? I got skipped. Skip to Malou. Skip to Malou. Anyway, I didn't see your name there. I know this is John in Florida, so I'm not skipping you now. Not skipping you now. I might be Skippy, but I'm not skipping. All right. But anyway, all right. Well, listen. A couple more questions did come. I think John sent a couple questions, which is good. But I'm going to give you all a chance to answer questions. I am going to play some music for you. Right. So I was talking to Noah today. Noah and I, Noah's a regional captain of CPI based in Boston. We both were dealing with a lot of heavy snow. Our respective cities are still recovering from the snow out. And I was reminded of the great Leslie Larkham. Right. So you all know that we play the music of Cornelius Cardew. I appreciate his communist music. He was a British composer who became a communist, and he's composed some music that I like in an ironic way because the lyrics are very forced. And I like Cornelius Cardew's music, but it is very how do you say, the lyrics are a little bit much. Well, Leslie Larkham is a woman who is the head of the strings music department at a very prestigious college in Britain, at Dulwich College. Her name is Leslie Larkham, and she was an associate of Cornelius Cardew, and she's a member of the Revolutionary Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninists, which is the Cardew group in Britain. And she got canceled, right? This was actually before they called it cancel culture, right? Social media was just getting going. They didn't call it cancel culture. But in, October 14th, or in October of 2014, they launched a hate campaign against her because she was having her students sing the music of Kim Il-sung, right? So I guess Kim Il-sung wrote some music. I didn't know that Kim Il-sung composed music, but this is her. Her name's Leslie Larkham. She was a student of Cornelius Cardew's, and she has been to North Korea a number of times. She is a Marxist-Leninist communist, and she supports Kim Il-sung. And so she had her students in the violin and strings section at Dulwich College in Britain sing the music of Kim Il-sung. Good for her. And they canceled her for it. They did a hate article about her in the Daily Mail and all of this. So, I reached out to her on Facebook. She didn't reply. And I wanted to do everything I could to support her because I thought, people play music. Her response to the Daily Mail is she said, look, I teach music from Argentina to my students. I teach music from China. I teach music from the African continent. So what if I'm teaching music from North Korea? What's the wrong with that, right? It's just a country, and she's been there. And oh my God, they tried to get her fired. They tried to destroy her reputation. And I wanted to support her. She didn't really respond to my support. Maybe, she was a little paranoid. But I found a couple interviews that she did. Here's an interview that she did. I'm putting it in the chat with an Australian radio station about Cornelius Cardew. Cornelius Cardew apparently was her mentor and trained her as a musician. And her background is actually in music, not communism, but she just was mentored by Cornelius Cardew and became a communist. She's been to North Korea. And now she loves North Korea enough that she taught her students North Korean communist music, which I think is really awesome. So I was listening to this interview with Leslie Larkham that's from Australian radio. And the link is down in the chat. And in the music, in the interview, she talks about how Cornelius Cardew took one of the oldest Union songs in history, and he updated the words. And this is really interesting to me, right? Where was the first modern working class movement, right? In the modern world, it was in Britain. It was the Chartist movement in the 1700s. The factory workers of Britain formed the Chartists, which was a movement for a 12-hour workday and other protections for workers. You had the Chartist movement, and you had the labor movement in Britain in the 1700s. And when you think of Union songs, you think of Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger and like Solidarity Forever. But if you listen to, there's a certain number of like union and labor songs from Britain from way back. We're talking like the 1700s that are actually like, they sound like old churchy hymns and they're a bit dark, right? There's one of those songs called the Black Leg Miner, right? That I think it became popular in the 80s again, but it's a very dark song. It's in the evening after dark, the black leg miner goes to work. With his moleskin pants and dirty shirt, there goes the black leg miner. It's about scab workers, right? And there's another one that I've used at CPI events before, a very old union song. Step by step, the longest march can be won, can be won. Anyhow, one of these really old labor songs is called The Coal Miner, or the Coal Owner and the Pitman's Wife. And so Leslie Larkham has performed it on the violin. But I wanted to play the original version of the song. The song is about a dialogue. It's a dialogue between a coal owner and a woman who's the wife of a coal miner. A pitman is a coal miner. And basically the story is that the coal miner is, or the coal owner, the wealthy capitalist who owns the mine, is walking down the road one day, and he sees a woman who looks really upset. And he confronts her and says, "What's the problem?" And she says, "Oh, I've just been let out of hell. I've just been let out of hell." And he says, "You've been let out of hell? Why are they letting you out of hell?" And she says, "Well, they're trying to make room for all the wealthy capitalists like you that are going to go there for mistreating the workers." That's what the song is about. And so I'm going to play the original version of the song. Again, this is a really old labor song from like the 1700s. And then I'm going to play Cornelius Cardew's updated version of it that he did. So this is the classic labor song that Leslie Larkham recorded on the violin. But this is it being performed and sung by an Australian folk singer. So here we go. The Coal Owner and the Pitman's Wife.
Dialogue, I'll tell you, as true as my life, between a coal owner and a poor pitman's wife. As she was a travelling all on the highway, she met a coal owner, and this she did say, "Derry down, 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 derry down." "Good morning, Lord Firedamp," this woman she said, "I'll do you no harm, sir, don't be afraid. If you'd been where I'd been for most of me life, you wouldn't turn pale at a poor pitman's wife. Derry down, 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 derry down." "Then where have you been?" the owner he cried. "I've been in hell," the poor woman replied. "If you come from hell, then tell me quite plain how you contrived to get out again. Derry down, 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 derry down." "Either way I got out, the truth I will tell. They're turning the poor folk all out of hell. This is to make room for the rich wicked race, but there is a great number of them in that place. Derry down, 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 derry down." And the coal owners is the next on command to arrive in hell, as I understand. For I heard the old devil say as I came out, the coal owners all had received their rout. Derry down, 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 derry down. How does the devil behave in that place? Sir, he is cruel to the rich wicked race. He is far more cruel than you can suppose. He's like a mad bull with a ring through his nose. Derry down, 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 derry down. be an owner, sir, take my advice. Agree with your men and give them a fair price. For if and you do not know very well, you'll be in great danger of going to hell. Derry down, 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 Derry down. For all ye coal owners great fortunes has made by those jovial men that works in the coal trade. Now how can you think for to prosper and thrive by wanting to starve your poor workers alive? Derry down, 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 Derry down. Good woman, says he, I must bid you farewell. You give me a dismal account about hell. If this be all true that you say unto me, I'll be home like a whippet, with me poor men agree. Derry down, 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 Derry down. So come ye poor pitmen and join heart and hand, for when you're off work all trades at a stand. In the town of Newcastle all cry out amain, all gin at the pits we're at work once again. Derry down, 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 Derry down. Well, the pit gates are locked, little more I've to say. I was turned out of my house on the 13th of May. But it's now to conclude, and I'll finish my song. I hope you'll relieve me and let me carry on. Derry down, 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 Derry down. Derry down, 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 Derry down.
Yeah, so that's the original version of the song. And so this is Cornelius Cardew. He changed it to the Workers' song and made the lyrics a little less religious and a little more just explicitly political. So this is Cornelius Cardew's song. It's not about a coal owner and a pitman's wife. It's rather just kind of a Marxist anthem that I really appreciate. So here you go. The Workers' Song by Cornelius Cardew. Same tune, but new lyrics.
I am a worker and I say it with pride. The rich and their system I've always defied. The wealth is created by our class far and wide, but the fruits of our labor are always denied. The system's bad, bad, it will have to go. I've worked with men from all over the globe. We're all of one class, we share weal and woe. But lately the racists have been launching attacks directed against the entire working class. We must fight, yes, we've got to fight back. Lately my wages have been going right down. The same thing is true for each worker in town. The government has not got our interests at heart. Just keeping alive has become quite an art. They go down, down, yes, wages go down. I went to the union to ask what to do, but the man at headquarters just hadn't a clue. He had a portrait of Callahan, and before it he knelt, and his only advice was to tighten my belt. He speaks for the rich and not for the working man. The cause of all problems is a capitalist class. They cause wars, they cause hardship, and they always blame us. With our Marxist, Leninist party to lead, we have the solution. What the working class needs is
Yeah, I love that. I just love how Cordu, I went to the Union and I asked what to do. The men at headquarters, they hadn't a clue. They had a portrait of Hillary Clinton, and before it they knelt, and their only advice was to tighten my belt. Speaks the rich. Anyway, and then, of course, the last verse. The cause of our problem is the capitalist class. They launch wars, they launch hardship, and they always blame us. But with our Marxist Leninist party to lead, we have the solution that the working class needs. It's proletarian revolution. I just love Cardew. I love it ironically, right? Because it's just so like in your face, right? I mean, it's just, he had no shame. Let me put it that way. No subtlety. It just kind of slaps you in the face with communism in every song, and it's amusing. It really is. I love, and one thing, it would be awesome if I could interview Leslie Larkham on this channel about communism, about North Korea, about how they tried to cancel her for being a music professor. That would be awesome. And I would be nice to her. I wouldn't attack her in any way. I don't know why. I wouldn't be here to make fun of her, but I don't think she's going to do that. She got a little nervous. I did reach out to her and offer my support during the whole cancel campaign against her, but what can you do? What can you do? So, but yeah, I think it's really neat that there's a string composer or a string professor, a violin string professor who has been to North Korea and loves Kim Il-sung. And, they tried to cancel her for teaching her students Kim Il-sung music. So I think that's really awesome. And I wish her my best. And that, I'll tell you one thing that's interesting. I mean, the Cornelius Cardew wing of communism, right? They're Hoxhists, followers of Enver Hoxha in Albania. They remind me of the LaRouche movement in a lot of ways. First of all, they actually were very against rock and roll music. They even published a pamphlet, "Punk Rock is Fascist," that they distributed. That was one thing. I like the LaRouche people. They have a lot of composers that are their members, right? I look over their stuff. It's like they're like ideologically, they don't line up with LaRouche. LaRouche was not a supporter of Albania. He was not an anti-revisionist. LaRouche was a Trotskyist who became his own thing, and the National Caucus of Labor Committees, and eventually the American System and Schiller Institute and all that. But I look at the followers of Hardiel Baines, who was this pro-Albanian communist, who has the Communist Party of Canada, Marxist-Leninist, the CPCML, the Revolutionary Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist. I think there was for a while, I mean, their website's still up. It hasn't been updated in a long time. The United States Marxist-Leninist Organization. I look at their stuff and I look at, it reminds me of LaRoucheism. And the music, the classical music focus, they seem to really emphasize classical music. They really are into like math and physics, and I don't know. I mean, I find it to be interesting. And they're really into the philosophical aspects of Marxism. It's really hard to get your hands on any of their books. I did get my hands somewhere in this apartment. I have a Hardiel Baines book that I found on an obscure used books website, but you can't find their writings. Their writings are quite hard to find, but somewhere I have a Hardiel Baines book that was published in the 90s. Hardiel Baines was this guy of Indian descent who was a communist college professor who was like the leader of this tendency of pro-Albanian communists that Cornelius Cardew came out of. I find these kinds of organizations to be fascinating, guys. I really do, right? And the leader of this kind of international current of pro-Albanian communist stuff was this guy Hardiel Baines. And I have somewhere a book that he wrote, and if I can find it, I'd like to show it to you all because it has a flower on the cover of it. This pink flower. And it's just a cute pink flower, but the flower, I guess, is Kim Il-sungia. It is the flower that was discovered in North Korea that they named after Kim Il-sung. So I think that's pretty neat. And it's just like, it's the book is called, I think the book is called Communism by Hardy Baines. But then like the book has a beautiful flower on the cover, and that flower is Kim Il-sungya, the North Korean, the flower, the plant they discovered in North Korea and named after Kim Il-sung, which I think is awesome. So I'm trying to see if I have this book anywhere. If I do, I have it somewhere. It's around here. Where is it? Do I have this book? But yeah. No. Can't find it. But yeah, I find these kind of different, communist groups to be fascinating, and the different communist sects and all of that. I find that to be very, very interesting. And so, and that's what I write about generally. I wrote a book about Jerry Healy, and I'm writing, the history of the Communist Party, and I find this stuff to be very, very interesting. So, yeah, if anyone knows where I could order more of Hardy Baines' writings, I do find him to be an interesting figure. At the end of the day, these are all illiberal formations. And in the struggle against imperialism, illiberal formations are very, very important. They are very, very important. And, I'm not a Hoxhaist. I'm not a follower of the communists of Albania. But illiberal formations, how they work, etc., are very important. And it's important to know about illiberalism, and illiberal movements can be key in building an anti-imperialist group to carry out operations and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. So yeah. Alrighty, folks. Well, I'm gonna start answering questions here. I do want to remind you all, mark your calendar for August 15th, because that is when we are having our Center for Political Innovation National Convention in Chicago. It's going to be great. And, if you want to come to the 7-day program that we're having during it, if you're a member of CPI and you want to get your accreditation, you want to become accredited, or you just want to be there to, be part of it, after you've already been accredited, sign up. We'd really love to have you. We would really love to have you there. So you can register at this link, and just mark your calendar for the convention. The dream will be fulfilled. The dream will be fulfilled. Peace, innovation, and multipolarity. That is the convention. So here's the link. I'll put it in the Rumble chat as well. We are building for our national gathering. Last year's national gathering was absolutely tremendous. I guess I'll put on the short video of last year's national gathering, just so you can see what it was like. We'll put that on, and then I will start answering questions. So you guys got a long time to answer questions. So send me a couple more questions. But here we go. This is the video of last year's convention, also in the Chicago area. It'll be a different venue this time. We're going to do it differently, but here we go. All right, folks. So now the first question I will answer was sent by Talking Smack 58. And he said, as a unifying measure, not a replacement, but simply unifying, does CPI believe that a fifth or sixth international is necessary to unify anti-imperialist groups? Focusing on anti-imperialism alone should be a wide unifying message or issue for many across the spectrum. No? Curious your thoughts. Appreciate your work. Well, the internationals is kind of a communism thing. And I think that global anti-imperialism has largely transcended beyond that stage. You know, I might have agreed with you even 2 or 3 years ago, but I'm at the point where I don't think communism as a brand is going to rebound. I think that communism represented a lot of different things, right? Obviously, Trotskyism is one thing. Obviously, Stalin and Mao, and then eventually Deng Xiaoping theory, and that what calls itself communism gave voice to a lot of different societal forces, and that official communism, Soviet Marxism, Leninism, is no longer where anti-imperialism is at for obvious reasons that are not based on ideology, but are based on the realities of the world, and that some kind of international movement that was dedicated to opposing imperialism is the kind of thing I would really like. I would think that would be great. And for a while, we were involved with an attempt at building some kind of regroupment among Marxist-Leninists. There was something called the World Anti-Imperialist Platform. And we were involved with that for a while, but then I don't know, things got weird, and I don't know, we're not part of that any longer. And honestly, we had a couple events, and Joe T. Brar, who's our friend, was very involved with it, but it's not really where we're at. We're not classical MLs. We are anti-imperialists, and we're innovationists, and we have transcended to a higher stage. And that was an attempt to push back against the Greek Communist Party that has taken international communist bodies in a pro-imperialist or at least neutral direction. Whereas, I think it was the People's Democracy Party of Korea, which is their like Marxist-Leninist party that functions out of France in exile, was trying to take anti-imperialism in a different direction, but it just, it was not, I don't know. It's not where we're at politically right now. But we signed some of their early declarations, and I agree with their overall message, which is imperialism is the enemy. And, that should be obvious, but very few communists believe that any longer. But as far as forming like a fifth international or a sixth international, I remember when Hugo Chavez called for that. He called for the formation of a fifth international, and that was a noble call that he made to try and unify anti-imperialist forces and Marxists, really. And that was noble, but Marxism, as we've seen, Marxism is dead. It's unfortunate, but there are very good governments that are anti-imperialist now that have Marxist-Leninist roots, like Vietnam, like People's Korea, like China. But at the same time, there are, Shia Muslims that are anti-imperialists. There are Bolivarian socialists, the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, the Union of Sahel States and Ibrahim Traore. There are most anti-imperialists that are doing amazing things now, don't call themselves Marxist-Leninists. The ones who do have really changed the definition to embrace market reforms and Deng Xiaoping theory. And the majority of people, especially in the West, who call themselves Marxist-Leninists, are not anti-imperialist at all, right? So if the idea is we're going to build a movement based on Marxism, Leninism, that's just not going to work, because that's just not where anti-imperialism is at. In the 70s and 80s, if you called yourself a Marxist-Leninist, everyone would assume you were anti-imperialist. Many were not, but they would then have to explain, oh, I'm not like the Marxist-Leninists of the world. But that's not the case anymore. Marxism, Leninism as a brand is largely identified with pro-imperialist woke politics in the West, and, some kind of, there's a lot of people around the world who think they're anti-imperialist, but they hate China, they hate Russia, they hate Vietnam, they hate North Korea. They want to go back to doing exactly what Stalin did in the good old days. They want to go back to the Cultural Revolution in China. And that's just not where things are at. Oh, I do have the book. Here we go. I have it. Here it is. Communism by Hardiel Baines, 1989 to 1991. I have the book. Would you believe it? I have Hardiel Baines' book, Communism, 1989 to 1991. There we go. I knew I had it somewhere. And this is Kim Il-sungya, The Flower. So there you go. But anyway, I'll probably sit in the bathtub tonight and read it before I go to bed. But anyway, anyhow, so yeah, I mean, I just don't see, if you're calling yourself, your idea was for a new international organization that would be based on anti-imperialism. That I agree with. That I would be all for. However, at the same time, right, if that organization was calling itself a fifth international or a sixth international, it would be claiming the continuity of the first international of Karl Marx, the second international, which is AOC and DSA, the third international, the Comintern. And if it was a fifth or sixth international, it'd probably be including the Trotskyites, right? It created the fourth international. Now, maybe you consider the Maoists to have been a fourth international or something, but they never formed an international body. So I don't know, man. I don't see something that claims that kind of continuity going anyplace. I'll be honest with you. I mean, when it really gets down to it, I mean, I don't want to get into specifics here because that wouldn't be helpful, but most of the people, well, I don't know. I'm not even going to go any further than that. I think we've talked too much about that, but like, I mean, I'm trying to imagine who we would be in a room with, right? And how much of a disaster it would be to sit in the room with such people, right? The number of people in America that come out of communism or have links to communism and are anti-imperialist is very, very small. And the idea of getting those people in one room, and that would be a room that nothing productive would come out of. I'll just tell you that much, I'll just tell you that much. Look, the left couldn't even defend Uhuru, right? Uhuru, a group of black socialists, was charged with, with being by the FBI with being Russian agents because of their speech on Ukraine. And I got to tell you, Tucker Carlson did more than any communist or leftist did to support them. CPI did a lot to support them, which we're proud of. Freedom Road Socialist Organization made some statements, but I don't think they made some statements. They probably donated some money. The Workers' World Party made some statements, but then, from what I understand, wouldn't come to the rallies if CPI was there because they have a vendetta against me, which is absolutely ridiculous. And PSL tried to block their permits. The left couldn't come together to defend Uhuru, right? And I was actually told on the phone by the leaders of a new communist party that was formed that they basically are happy that the FBI went after Uhuru because they consider them competitors. I was in utter shock when they told me that, but I was basically told by certain social media grifters who don't even really have a real organization that they supported the prosecution of Uhuru because they disagree with them about race. I mean, it was just despicable. And they put some statement on their website. Oh boy, I was out in front of the federal courthouse, and we spent our own money, bought plane tickets, went to Florida, with our own money and our own time, went to Florida to support the Uhuru movement. And I was out in front of the federal courthouse on the day the trial started. John McCarthy was there for like multiple days of the trial. I was out in front of the federal courthouse on the day the trial ended, on the day of their sentencing, and these people, these are people from millionaire families, rich kids from California, who spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars on bot farms to make their videos go viral. So they can then leverage their clout to try and silence other people and all of that. But, you know, the idea of sending one person to make a statement to support a group of people on trial where they're trying to make a precedent that it's illegal to support, to do that, they couldn't do it. Well, that right there tells you that these are worthless people, right? You know, the Workers' World Party couldn't go and support the Uhuru movement because I was there. God forbid. Right. You know, and their vendetta against me is more important than whether or not it's illegal to be an anti-war activist. Right. PSL technically said they supported Uhuru, but, you know, they tried to pull their permit and block their Black is Back rally because they could raise so much money from Palestine. Right. You know, I mean, and there were other problems too. I mean, you know, there were other groups that are generally better than that put out horrendous statements about Uhuru. And it's just like, you know, so, I mean, it's like, you're saying you want to unify these different groups. I'm just telling you, right? If these groups can't even unify around, they're trying to make it illegal what we believe in. Maybe we should support the people that are on trial. They're not going to be able to unify and form anything. And, you know, and that's the thing. That's a common thing, right? When people first get into communism, they generally notice that there's about 500 different communist parties that all have, like, you know, less than 100 members. And they say, oh, why don't they all just form one party? They've clearly never thought of that before. And I'll be the smart one who gets them all to unify. And that'll be proof that I'm a great leader. And, you know, that's just part of being young. When you're a baby thinks they're the most powerful person in the world. And when you're young, you often have delusions of your own strength. And you just learn there are reasons that these groups are not together. You know, there are very big fundamental disagreements that they have. You know, these groups, they may have the same ideology or they may read the same books, but they interpret them very, very differently. And what they do in terms of day-to-day activism is very different. And often they're on the opposite sides of very large issues. And the reason they're not together is for that reason. Right. And that's a big thing that people have to learn. And that one thing that I have said, and I said this in Austin, Texas, when CPI we had our first public event. I said this, and I've said this over and over and over again, which is I have no interest in left unity. Right. And the reason for that is that, you know, if the tiny, tiny, tiny group of people in America who call themselves communists were to somehow merge into one group, right, what would that accomplish? Right. It would mean that maybe 20,000 people tops, probably about 10,000 people, a small group of people were in the same group. And that group would still be small and irrelevant and meaningless. But such a group would be nailing its own coffin, because in order to get all of those communists into one group, you would have to accommodate all the bullshit that keeps them isolated. Right. You know, I mean, communist groups, you know, you can't wave the American flag because it's Nazi. And communist groups, you know, you can't, you know, use the wrong pronoun. And it would just be a list of things that make you irrelevant and crazy to most people that would have to be accommodated in order to get all those people in the room to sign the list. I want to unify with the masses of Americans in their millions who oppose war. That's who I want to unify with. I don't want to unify the collection of irrelevant, mostly woke, pandering, crazy, you know, fringe elements who call themselves communists. I mean, there's just no point in doing that. I mean, it's like, you know, I want to unify with the masses of people. I don't want to unify with the left. And in order to unify with the left, you have to bend over backwards to accommodate. And no matter what you do, you're going to be wrong. Look, the problem is this, right? And I've stated this on streams before. It's a psychological problem more than anything. But what it really gets down to is that, you know, nobody really thinks we can win, right? And among all the people who identify as communists, very few of them think we can win, right? That it's just kind of assumed we're not going to win. And on top of that, there's not like an issue that desperately needs to change. It's kind of an intellectual exercise. So if it's assumed that we're not going to win, and it's assumed that this is just an intellectual exercise, what motivates people? The desire for validation, right? Which is a natural human desire, which there's nothing wrong with wanting validation. You deserve validation, right? Everyone deserves validation. But, you know, the kind of people who get involved in communist politics right now, the way things are set up, the kind of people that get involved in communist politics, they seek validation. It's the same for libertarians. It's the same for a lot of the people on the more, you know, extreme ends of the far right. You know, these are politics that they don't, they assume are never going to develop a mass following. So they want validation. So then it becomes an issue of who's going to get the validation. And that tends to be what the drama is in all the spaces you're describing. If there was to be some kind of new body that would be formed of anti-imperialists, right, it would immediately become a fight over who deserves the validation, who gets to be on the stage, who gets their face on the big sign. It would immediately become a big contest, and there would be an endless amount of, I can't be seen with him, or he's, you know. And so if it's a fight over validation, right, if it's about who gets the validation, right, if it's a struggle for validation, it's not a struggle to actually take power. Comes a fight over validation, right? What do you do in order to prove that you deserve the validation and others don't? Well, you say, I'm the most extreme in my views. I'm the most extreme in my views is what you argue, right? And I'm the most extreme in my views. And so therefore the others are not as extreme as I am. So I deserve the validation. They don't. And that's why leftists, you know, that's why these groups become more and more irrelevant over the time, right? It becomes, you're not performing for the population at all. You're proving to the other people in your bubble that you deserve the validation and they don't. So you want to prove that you're the most pure and the most extreme in your views, and you're getting further and further away from what the bulk of the population, believes, in order to prove that you're the most pure in a subculture. And that's a recipe for disaster. And that's really what most of the communist groups, that's what we've really gotten to at this point. Right? It's you know, no one's ever going to win. So it's a fight over validation. And the way you prove you're worthy of the validation, you should be the one on the stage, you should be the one getting the attention, not other people, is you have the most over the top extreme views, and you're the most divisive, and you won't work with other people and all of that. And you know, it's just a recipe for disaster. And our message has long been out of the movement to the masses, which is we don't care what the small minority of people in America who call themselves communists believe. We want to reach the population overall. And so, you know, that's what I'm trying to get you to understand. And I have whole streams about this, but I appreciate Talking Smack 58 for asking this question. I appreciate that. Because it's a fair question to ask, right? And yeah, it would be nice. It would be nice in theory if all of us who agree on certain things could form one organization and could work together in a way that respected each other and, you know, and then enabled this message to get to the broad masses of people. But that's just not possible. It's not possible. And attempts at it, largely make things worse, not better. It's not a good use of our time, you know. And I think about what CPI has accomplished in the short amount of time we've existed. We had our first real life meetup in 2021. Think about everything we've done since 2021. 5 years we've been around. None of that would have been possible if we had been in a room negotiating with one of these people. And if we'd had to sit there and make sure that the committee of the high up on the thing had stamped their approval on it, we wouldn't have done any of that. And you go to the About Us page, right? Go to the CPI website. We have a timeline of everything CPI has accomplished on our website, right? And I just go over that timeline, right? And just look at everything we've done. We would have done none of this if we had to get permission from one of these wackos, right? You know, if we were in one of these communist groups, and we had to get permission from them none of this would have happened. All the great achievements we've had for anti-imperialism would never have happened because we would have had to beg for permission from a group of people who would have told us not to do it because they deserve the validation, not you. You know, I mean, you look at it. We wouldn't have been able to have our UN press conference. We wouldn't have been able to have the great workshops. We wouldn't have been able to distribute thousands of pamphlets at the Libertarian Party convention. We wouldn't have done all the great work we've done for Uhuru. I mean, we wouldn't have, I mean, just look at everything we've done as an anti-imperialist force in America. None of that would have happened if we had to ask for permission from the Central Committee of the, you know, just forget it, you know, and, you know, I understand there are probably people watching this who don't understand that any of this is important, right? And they don't understand that having an internet brand is the same thing, is not as important as building a real movement. And if you don't understand that, I hope that someday you do, but I'm not, you know, I may not be speaking to you. You know, you may not, you know, you go to the CPI USA, our Center for Political Innovation website, go to About and look at all that we have done to promote anti-imperialism, all the times we've been in the streets, all the times we've had workshops, all the banner drops, all the interventions we have done, the rallies to support Ibrahim Traore, the Houthi books we distributed in bulk, teaching people about the Houthis, right? I mean, all that we have done, right? The National Days of Action for Peace with Russia, all that we have done, all the educational work we've done, right? And, you know, reaching out to people who would never go looking for this message, doing education about anti-imperialism. Look at all that we have done. We wouldn't have been able to do any of that if we had tried to unify with one of these other groups, right? You know, we wouldn't have been able to do any of that. And, you know, if, you know, I mean, it just wouldn't have happened. So, you know, and that's that. That's all there is to it. And if you don't understand why all this is important, then I'm not talking to you because you don't get it. But, you know, people being in their internet bubble and listening to podcasts, it may educate them in some ways. But, you know, and I could go on about this and, you know, there's many different aspects of this, but at the end of the day, we have shit to do. We have done shit. And unifying with assholes is, you know, and begging assholes to work with us is not going to help us do all the amazing things that we've done. Instead, we're building a real movement. That's what we're doing. End of story. All right. Long answer to a question, but it's an important question. And Talking Smack 58 asked it in a respectful way, right? He wasn't there to be like, oh, why don't you work with so-and-so? He said, no, like, what if we focused on doing this? Something that in theory might be a good thing. But in practice, it wouldn't be worth our time. So now Nikki Squid said, Caleb, China has a waste inattentive of just about zero waste. How can America adopt waste management efforts? I don't know anything about waste management. I really don't. That is a topic that I'm not an engineer, you know, and I mean, that's something I just don't know about, right? It's interesting. I will say that, you know, many people have pointed out that when it comes to environmentalism, China has a great record, right? I mean, that China, while they're at the same time rapidly growing and they have a huge industrial output, in terms of clean air, they have like clean air apps. They've cleaned up their cities from pollution. I mean, that China, you know, is at the same time that they are raising millions of people out of poverty, they are operating in a sustainable way with the environment, and they're doing so in a way that if one was sincere in their environmentalism would be very much in awe of China. However, environmental organizations tend to demonize China, which doesn't make any sense. China leads the world in green technology. China, you know, you said their waste is, you know, that they're, in terms of waste output, they're you know, they're doing an amazing job of that. I believe you. It fits everything that I've ever read about China. But environmentalists don't praise them. They demonize them. And that most environmental groups are hit groups. They're going after certain countries. They're generally trying to prevent development of the third world. They're promoting overpopulation and Malthusianism. You know, why do environmental groups not like nuclear power? Right? If you're concerned about air pollution, if you're concerned about, the CO2 and, and fossil fuels, you should love nuclear power. Environmental groups hate nuclear power. Why? Right? In terms of the nuclear waste that is put out by nuclear power, it is very low compared to, what they do with burning coal, burning oil, right? So you'd think that nuclear power, and especially the push for fusion energy that China and Russia are working very hard on, you think that'd be the focus of what environmental groups want, but it's not, right? I'm not opposed to environmentalism in principle, right? We need to operate with nature in a sustainable way. However, at the same time, I'm just telling you, if you look at the details, at the same time, there is something else going on with a lot of environmental groups, that they're not working to try they're not working to try and just make the environment more sustainable. They're serving some kind of political agenda, and they're promoting some people while pushing against others. And that's that. Hold on. So I wanted to also, so then John sent a question from John. I'm a little bit ahead of myself, because while I was answering that question, I was actually looking. So John said, Iran has been working on a railroad that would connect China to Europe. You are absolutely right. And, Iran is already connected. There is a train that goes from Russia, from Moscow, down to Iran to Saudi Arabia. Right. And that's already the case. And that Iran is very much trying to connect the world. And they actually raised at the United Nations. This is a while back. I think this is from 2017. I was at the UN, and they gave a very, very insightful answer to, what to do about Afghanistan. And they put forward a program. This was in 2015. This is a story I did way back in 2015 when I worked at Press TV, about Iran's, solution of building trains to stabilize Afghanistan. And I'm actually going to put this on. This is a story I did. My abilities as a broadcast journalist have significantly improved since 2015. So, if I seem a little robotic or not as good, well, then just look at how much I've improved. I talk on TV a lot better now. But this is a story I did about how Iran was trying to stabilize Afghanistan with trains.
Just hours after the Afghan parliament came under a terrorist attack, the United Nations Security Council convened to discuss the situation in the country. Reports to the council indicated a rise of terrorism and violence in the war-torn country in the past few months. Iran presented its strategy for Afghanistan to the Security Council. Remarks from the deputy ambassador emphasized the need for economic cooperation, as well as the danger of drug trafficking.
On the counter-narcotic efforts, we are particularly concerned about the reports indicating the increase in the opium poppy cultivation in Afghanistan during the recent years. It's a real warning sign for the region and beyond. These threats should be addressed by the international community very seriously.
The Iranian deputy ambassador described his country's new railroad project as a means of helping development in the region and combating extremism. The Iranian government sees the expansion of regional trade and transport as key to reducing instability.
In the view of the Iranian government, trade and transit are two main fields for expansion of Tehran-Kabul relations. The railroad project between Herat and the city of Khaf in Iran, and Iran's readiness to make available its port facilities in Chabahar to Afghanistan are two major and ongoing projects in this field. As Afghanistan is a landlocked country, it is agreed that these two projects are very important.
The presentation by the Iranian representative emphasized cooperation of all parties in the region, including Pakistan, India, and China, in order to halt the increasing chaos and expansion of terrorist groups. Caleb Maupin, Press TV, New York.
Yeah, so I've gotten better, I think, but that was a story I did for Press TV about Iran got up at the UN Security Council and said, look, if you want people in Afghanistan to stop getting involved in drug gangs and terrorist groups, trade and transport, build highways. And what you're saying about Iran, that fits everything. Iran is part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And, Yeah, and Iran and Saudi Arabia were at odds, but China brought them together because China buys oil from both of them. And let's just hope Trump doesn't attack Iran. I did an interview with WBAI Radio today that'll be on YouTube here tomorrow morning. I'll just premiere it tomorrow morning, but I might premiere it here tonight after the stream is over. We'll see. But in that interview, I made my prediction that Trump is going through his options. He wants to do something theatrical and dramatic regarding Iran. He doesn't want an actual invasion because that would come at political cost to him. He wants to do something like what he did with Maduro or what he did with killing Qasem Soleimani. He wants to do something that, is exciting and theatrical, and is seen as him, taking dramatic moves, gets a lot of headlines, gets a lot of attention, but doesn't come at the political cost of an invasion. It appears, according to reports, he's considering assassinating Iran's supreme leader. I know Iran is prepared to defend their supreme leader, and that what Trump did to Maduro, that kidnapping, has been studied. Whatever techniques and weapons were used to carry that out have been studied by every anti-imperialist country in the world to make sure that that doesn't happen to them. But, I mean, Trump would like to somehow attack Iran to make Israel happy, do something to Iran, but also not invade Iran. And we saw how after, U.S. Navy personnel were being killed and, by the Houthis in Yemen, all of a sudden Trump pulled out, and J.D. Vance was out there defensively saying, it's not Vietnam, because Trump knows, Trump attacking Iran is politically disastrous for him, but it's being demanded by Israel. And so Trump is trying to figure out a way he can get credit for attacking Iran and not get fallout from attacking Iran. That's what's going on right now. I can almost guarantee you. They're sitting there saying, how can we attack Iran but not attack Iran? And that's what he's trying to figure out. And, good luck with that one. I don't know. I think it's a disaster. The American people don't want this war, and we're going to be in the streets around the country. We're having a protest on Saturday in Washington, D.C., or in New York City. We're having a protest in Chicago and Minneapolis and L.A. and many other cities. Looks like people in Colorado are going to be in the streets. Looks like people in Iowa are going to be in the streets. Looks like people are going to be in the streets in Kentucky. Different cities, we're going to have our members out there saying we don't want Epstein's war. And it's important, right? And I hope that that this situation with Iran de-escalates. It's based on bullshit. Iran has the right to peaceful nuclear energy, right? The demand that they don't have it because it could potentially turn into a bomb, an atomic bomb, when Israel has hundreds of nuclear bombs, is pretty ridiculous. The whole premise of the whole thing is just stupid. Iran is the center of anti-imperialism in the Middle East right now. And, a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that. They want to deny that. But, if you really support the Palestinians, you have to support Iran, because Iran is the main force backing the Palestinians, right? Iran is not responsible for what Hamas does. And that's something that the, the Netanyahu folks will say a lot, and they're not correct about that. Iran doesn't give orders to Hamas, but throughout the region, the Houthis that are inspired by Iran, they are the biggest allies of the Palestinians. Hezbollah, inspired by Iran, biggest allies of the Palestinians. Hamas and Iran don't exactly get along. There's a rivalry. Hamas is Sunni. They're formerly the Muslim Brotherhood of Palestine. So it's a little more complicated when it comes to Hamas and Iran. But throughout the region, the main enemies of Israel, the main opponents of Israel on the battlefield, are allies of Iran. And that's what this is really about. They know Iran is not going to get a nuclear weapon. It's not about a nuclear weapon. It's about weakening Iran. They want a justification to attack Iran. And I hope that Trump does the sensible thing and backs away from it. And I hope this whole thing shifts. I hope the news cycle just pivots away from this. That's what I really hope. I hope the news cycle, we all start talking about, I don't know. We all, we all start talking about something. Anyway, that's what I hope, is that the news cycle transitions and we all forget that Trump was about to strike Iran and we all just move on to something else. That's probably the best outcome here. So let's hope that happens, right? That, that some celebrity, some celebrity runs naked through the streets or something. Some famous person runs naked through the streets and says something wildly offensive on the internet, and we have a national debate about that. Yeah, some celebrity runs naked through the streets of Los Angeles. It's too cold here in New York. And says a slew of racially offensive things. And then Trump gets on the internet and supports them because he's racist. And then everyone gets mad at Trump for supporting the celebrity who ran naked through the streets, saying the racist things. And we have a national conversation about the naked celebrity who said the racist things. And we all just forget Trump was about to strike Iran. That's what I'm hoping for. Just that's a crude way of putting it, but you know what I'm saying. I really hope that if the conversation can pivot away from Trump's about to strike Iran, will he do it? I think then we'll be safe and there won't be an attack on Iran. And that's what I'm hoping for. So, if anyone knows a celebrity who could do that, if you know a celebrity who could run naked through the streets of Los Angeles and say a bunch of racist things, and then have Trump tweet in support of him, and then we have a national argument about the racist celebrity who ran naked. If anyone can make that happen, please do it. That's probably our best hope for opposing war. I mean, I hate to be, I shouldn't be joking about something like this, but I mean, what else can I say? I don't know. I mean, yeah, what I'm basically saying is it just goes to show you how the news cycle is caught up with all of this, right? That's basically Trump attacking or not attacking Iran is related to the polls and how he appears in the news cycle. And that's so messed up. It's like people will die or not die. Whole countries, hundreds of thousands of people could potentially die because Trump thought it would make him look good on TV, or they could not die because Trump thought it wouldn't make him look good on TV. I mean, this is so messed up on so many levels. It is so messed up. But anyway, so there's one more question that came in. Hempcar asked me, which is, again, I think this is a perfectly fair thing for you to ask, Hempcar. It's widely promoted all over the internet that the Freemasons, right, which is Freemasonry was a fraternal order. It still exists, right? That the Freemasons take pictures of themselves with their hand in their shirt pocket, and that there's a photo of Karl Marx with his hand in his shirt pocket. And so that's proof that he was a Freemason. Well, first of all, you look at it, Masonry is a very important thing, right? In the overthrow of feudalism and really the struggle to repel the power of the Catholic Church in like the 1700s and 1800s, Masonry was very, very important. And you're fine to ask this question, Hempcar. Again, I welcome these kind of questions. The thing is, right, Karl Marx's beliefs and Masonry don't line up for a couple reasons. Number one, I believe they didn't allow people of Jewish descent to be Freemasons until like the 20th century. Regardless, to be a Freemason, you must believe in God, right? That is one of their principal beliefs. You must believe in God. The symbol of Freemasonry is the G, and surrounded with the compass and square. Right. And the G stands for God, and the G also stands for geometry. And they believe that geometry, the laws of physics, mathematics is proof that there's order in the universe and that God exists. Masons, they're not Christians per se, right? Their beliefs are very Unitarian, right? They believe that like there's one supreme being that creates everything, but they read the Quran, they read the Bible like critically. And they're very critical of the Catholic Church for holding back the sciences, et cetera. They're kind of a modernist movement. You look at some of the beliefs of Thomas Jefferson, in the Jefferson Bible, and, the deism or the pantheism of a lot of the founding fathers. They were Freemasons, right? Masonry is a very, it was British capitalism, emerging and overthrowing feudalism, and it was kind of a brotherhood or a secret society of people that had beliefs that were very, very much in opposition to especially the Catholic Church, but also to conventional religion in general. And it was kind of a brotherhood of wealthy capitalists, basically, who promoted certain values that are largely the values of the British Empire. Right. Masonry, it's a brotherhood created to espouse certain principles and values that are largely British Empire values. Right. And in America, a lot of books on Masonry are written by a Confederate general, Albert Pike. who was, Albert Pike was pro-British, and he wanted to preserve slavery in the South because that was good for Britain. They would get the cheap cotton. And Albert Pike was also one of the main creators of the Ku Klux Klan. He kind of wrote the manuals and designed the KKK. And he was a Freemason, and he wrote a number of books about Masonry, but Masonry today is, but one of the beliefs of Masons, number one, is you can't believe in God. Well, Karl Marx was an atheist. He was a dialectical materialist. He did not believe in any religion at all, right? Masons tended to be critical of regular religion. They believed in like one supreme being, and Marx rejected all religion. That's one. On one count, he couldn't have been a Mason. On another count number two, that he couldn't have been a Mason, right, is that Masons don't allow communists. That's actually one of their rules. You cannot be a communist and be a Freemason. It is like, if you're, trying to become a Freemason, and it says, one of their questions is, are you a communist? So Karl Marx is the founder of communists. So you can't be a communist and you can't be an atheist, right? So, and the Freemasons, some of their values include free market capitalism. They promote the free market. They believe in capitalism. And actually in Italy, the P2 Propaganda du Masonic Lodge was very key in Operation Gladio, which was the CIA's operation to destabilize Italy with the years of lead. So, generally the Masons are just kind of a fraternity, kind of a club for men. They don't allow Catholics because in Catholicism, you have the right of confession, and you might reveal the secrets of Masonry in confession. But that in the 20th century, they allow Jews, they allow Protestants, they allow Hindus. For a long time, it was whites only. And it was never really whites only, but they had certain ways there were certain rules that were interpreted, like if you're descended from a slave, you can't be a Mason. So they would prevent black people from joining. So black people started their own form of Masonry, which is called Prince Hall Masonry, which is very much tied up with the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam and a lot of black Muslims are in Prince Hall Masonry, which is an explicitly black form of Masonry. But generally among Freemasons, you have the Scottish Rite, the English Rite, and the French Rite. And those are just three different fraternal organizations that practice Masonry. They have their own different sets of rules. And it's kind of like the Boy Scouts. It's actually the Boy Scouts for adult men. You join and you go to meetings and you go to some workshops and you learn certain stories and legends, part of their wisdom, and then you get another badge. And then you go to another workshop and you learn another one of their stories and legends, and you get another badge. You recruit a few more people and you get another badge. And, you start out as a regular Mason, and then you're a Master Mason, and then you're a Knights Templar. And then they got all these degrees you get. And every time you get a degree, they have a big ceremony where you put on a costume and nothing wrong with that. Organizations do that kind of thing. People move up the ranks and all that. But it's just, that's Masonry, right? And the values that they're teaching you are largely, there is truth in all the different major religions. I don't know. It's just you're learning kind of British Empire values, right? They're not atheists, but they're not. They're certainly not going to allow any communism. Are they a secret conspiracy that runs the world? They kind of were. You could say that they were that in like the 1800s or 1900s. At this point, I would say they are not. At this point, it's a club for old men. And actually, if you go back to maybe even before the Second World War, you could argue that a lot of presidents and people like that were Freemasons, but nowadays they're not. I don't see any evidence that Obama was a Mason. I don't see any evidence that Trump is a Mason. I don't think Trump is a Freemason. I think generally Masonry kind of fell out of popularity among the global elite. It's an old-fashioned thing, right? It's kind of part of that as capitalism was overturning feudalism, as the so-called West was emerging, Masonry was a way that ideas that the emerging capitalist that the emerging capitalist class believed that were offensive to the bulk of the population, like believing that, all religion is the same and that there's one source, like believing in global free trade as a way to spread democracy and to spread values, like believing that, survival of the fittest, and things like that. Masonry was a vehicle through which high achieving people, not average people, but high achieving people, business owners, elected officials, and others could be brought into this kind of brotherhood that would teach them a certain set of values that were not for the bulk of the population, that were for high achieving people. And there's an influence of Masonry. For example, the Order of Skull and Bones, right? That's at Yale. That's a secret society at Yale. It's not Masonry, but it's similar to Masonry in that they find high achieving young men and they push certain values, and it's kind of secretive. And if you looked at what they actually do and what they actually believe, it'd be offensive to most people, but it's for the elite only. And there are things like Masonry that are very much part of our system today. The Bohemian Club is a lot like that, right? All the members of Congress and a lot of business people and Bill Gates, all that, they go to some place in the woods where they all are naked and they do weird rituals, and they're philosophical irrationalists and Satanists largely. I mean, I'm not literally, they're not worshiping a deity called Satan. They're believing that right and wrong don't exist, believing that human beings are a cancer on the earth. Bohemian Grove, Bohemian Club, that's kind of like Masonry in that it's a secret club that has secret rituals that only certain people can join, and they get together and they have values that if most people were to learn those values, they wouldn't agree with them. And publicly, they don't claim to believe those things, but privately they do, so you could say that's like Masonry. And the same with Skull and Bones. And the same with, there's a lot of things like that are like kind of like Masonry, where the rich and powerful get together and talk among themselves and espouse ideas that the general population wouldn't like. So you could say these things are inspired by Masonry, but honestly, Masonry is a bit tame. If you look at what, Jeffrey Epstein believed, if you look at what they believe in the Bohemian Grove, if you look at what they believe in Skull and Bones, Masonry sounds pretty chill. They believe that there's one God that's, that is the source of all the religions. They study the Torah, they study the Quran, they study the Bible, and they find overlap. That's pretty chill compared to, what they believe in the Bohemian Grove. There is no God, right? And that God is for weaklings. And that's pretty chill. Masonry seems pretty chill compared to what the people ruling over us now believe, honestly, right? It's pretty basic. There's one universal creator and mathematics, and, they believe in order. Actually, they're rationalists, right? The people who rule our world now are what you call philosophical irrationalists. They believe there is no order in the universe, and that with human willpower, you can define order. Whereas, the people, the Masons, they're rationalists. Their entire symbol, the compass with the G around it. I mean, their entire belief system is rationalism, and that leads them to a kind of universalist religious view, right? But that's pretty tame. I mean, that, they generally believe love your neighbor as yourself is in Christianity. They see it in Buddhism. They see it in Christianity, and again, for most people involved in Masonry, it's just kind of a club. After you're in the club a little while, you go to different workshops, you learn their beliefs. Their beliefs are, be nice to people. Western civilization is great. Free speech, freedom of religion, free trade, and commerce and doing business around the world is going to raise people up. I mean, Masonry is pretty tame compared to what the people who rule over us now believe. Masonry was a mechanism through which the ideals of the bourgeois revolution could be disseminated in the 1700s, 1800s, etc. That's really what it was. And it's interesting. I don't know. I talked to my grandparents. My grandparents talked about how, when there was no TV, right? TV was popularized in the 1950s when there was no television, right? In the 1920s, the 1930s, when there was no television, the Tuesday night card game and who you played cards with on Tuesday night was a really big deal because there was no TV. And so, what lodge you were a member of, right? The lodge, right? People were part of a lodge or a fraternity. What lodge you were a member of, was a really big deal. And it wasn't just the Masons, right? The Catholics had the Knights of Columbus. The Elks and the Moose, the Loyal Order of Moose, and the Odd Fellows Club. And there were a bunch of these different fraternal organizations. They usually had a women's organization and a men's organization, right? They were separate, gender segregated, but they'd have like an affiliated organization. The Masons had the Eastern Star, that's for women, right? Men were Freemasons, women were in the Order of the Eastern Star. And they do rituals, they give awards, they usually have a scholarship program for local kids at the high school. And, it's just the same. I don't know. I mean, again, and Karl Marx would not have been allowed to be one. He was of Jewish descent. He was an atheist. And I guess eventually they banned communism, the thing he, popularized and devoted his life to. Communism, they outlawed it. So I really doubt he was a Freemason. But one could argue that Masonry emerged from the struggle to overthrow feudalism in Europe. And so did Marxism, right? Marxism was part of the left. So you could argue that there was like a thrust in Europe. Feudalism was the institution, was held together by the Catholic Church. Masonry is anti-Catholic, and the Catholic Church considered it as such. Many papal statements from the Catholic Church condemned Masonry. Franco in Spain outlawed Masonry. Many fascist governments outlawed Masonry as a favor to the Catholic Church. Franco certainly did. I think Mussolini also outlawed Masonry when, it was considered Italy was, Catholicism was the state religion of Mussolini's Italy. So, these things are complicated, but no, the idea that Karl Marx had his hand in his shirt, so that proves he was a Freemason, and it's all been a big Masonic conspiracy. That's, there's a lot like that. There's a lot of like easy answers, right? And that's one thing, I have many critiques of conspiracy logic and Alex Jones, but one critique is that, generally what I don't like about Alex Jones is it's very pessimistic. There is no hope. Everything's a conspiracy, but one aspect like this Mason thing, right? The Masonic stuff, that's way too simple. The world is much more complicated than that. But, the Masonic narrative, well, it's the Masons secretly control everything. It's all the Masons. And it's like, everything's a front for the Masons. The Masons are secretly in a plot to run the world. It's like, how hard is it to get people to agree on stuff? Right? I mean, there are many different factions, right? Agreeing on and disagreeing about many different things. There are many different forces within our modern world that are competing. Sometimes they have shared interests and cooperate. Sometimes they don't. And the Masonic narrative, the conspiracy narrative centering around Masonry, it's a huge oversimplification. Let me just put it that way. I mean, it's like, yes, these clubs exist, not just Masons, but Elks, but among the elite, right? It tends to be Bohemian Club at this point. It tends to be Skull and Bones, right? The Masonry thing. Masonry is kind of an old-fashioned kind of thing, right? You got to go back to I think Franklin Roosevelt may have been a Freemason. I think he was probably the last president we had who was one. Maybe we had a couple more but generally Masonry is kind of an outdated thing. But do clubs among the elite, secret societies where they get together and discuss their beliefs exist? Yes. If you look into those secret societies and what they believe, is it horrifying? Yes. Do those secret societies generally have a contemptuous view of right and wrong and compassion and kindness and brotherhood? Yes. Do these secret societies believe things that are satanic, you could argue, in the sense that they oppose traditional morality, oppose right and wrong, but yes. So I mean, it's like the overall understanding that the elite get together and they don't really believe what they tell you they believe. They actually have these other beliefs that are quite sinister. That's not wrong. So it's just not that simple. It's just not that simple. Okay, I think I gave a very thorough answer to the question that was asked, and we're way past the third hour. So I'm going to say goodnight for now. I'm going to put on the closing music, but I'll be back. I think tomorrow night I might do a reaction to the State of the Union. I'll probably watch the State of the Union and give my reaction to it. I'll take notes and do my reaction. So that's probably what I'll do tomorrow night. So let's put on the closing music and yeah, we'll go from there. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.